Well, welcome back to the conversation. I am with one of my favorite people in sort of the health and wellness space. Deanna Hansen is really a pioneer in this world of fascia and fascia decompression. And this is maybe not an obvious topic when it comes to food sensitivities and the links here, but I think we're going to do our best to really show how the fascia come into play when it comes to not only food sensitivities, but in the immune system in general, the nervous system, and all these other aspects of our health and well-being that are tied in. And what I found to be the most effective, impactful, global systemic improvements when it comes to pain, when it comes to nervous system regulation, when it comes to immune function, digestion. There's so much that we can accomplish here with what Deanna has created, and she's going to go through a little bit of a demonstration as well. But first, we're going to get into a little discussion about fascia. So, for those who aren't familiar, Deanna, please just give me a little intro, maybe on the high level, and we can dive deeper. What is fascia, and why is it so important in your world?
Thank you so much, Jason, for having me here. And you're one of my favorite people as well. So, really appreciate this opportunity. So, the way I see the fascia, it's literally the cell membrane of every cell interconnecting every other cell. So, it's the communication system in the body. And there's a bunch of components, but it's comprised of two proteins, collagen and elastin. And when these proteins are in balance, what that does is it creates space in and around every cell, space for ease of absorption of nutrients into the cell, as well as the removal of waste and debris away. And if that's the case, our system is healthy because there's ease of flow. And that's really the goal, is ease of flow. The reality, though, is because we are constantly being pulled down by gravity, we're dominant on one side, we have past trauma, whether physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. Also, how do we use our body every day? Are we sitting crouched in front of a computer? Are we laborers? Are we playing sports? Are we playing instruments? All of these things add up to create the postural fascia alignment that we currently have. And the reason why this is so important is as we start tipping off balance due to all of these factors in life, that collagen protein, which is the structural component, it starts to migrate to areas of need so we don't tip over. In a moment of time, that acts as a protective measure for the body. But if it becomes a chronic patterning, then ultimately it's creating false walls and false floors, acting like scar tissue in the body, blocking flow. So now you have cells on the other side not receiving nutrients, as well as there's stagnancy in the body because we're not able to detoxify properly. And when we're talking about gut health, this is primarily important because most importantly, we want a body aligned so that we can optimize proper diaphragmatic breathing. Now, your diaphragm is a plate of muscle that rests below the rib cage. It's the ceiling to the abdominal organs, including the stomach, the floor to the heart and the lungs. And when it's working properly, it's giving this area a continual massage, adding energy into this space. The challenge is pain, fear, and stress cause you to reactively hold the breath. So if we had a trauma at some point in our early years and we have this trauma and we hold the breath, unlike a deer who survives an attack that shakes to remove that negative energy, we typically go into freeze mode. And then we age from that perspective. So just an example, my stomach organ is right here. So if I collapse this way out of fear and I don't reverse that in the moment, now I'm breathing from this alignment. So now my diaphragm is partly blocked. I start breathing more through the muscles of the upper chest as a natural response to that freeze moment. I'm not getting that proper mechanical action to support digestion, absorption, liver health, metabolic health, elimination, all of those things. And I come crashing down into that core space. So the weight of everything above, because now this muscle isn't strong, it becomes weak. We compress, we balloon, we inflame, we become toxic. So it's really understanding how to keep, again, that body properly aligned for optimal cell alignment to, again, support ease of flow.
A couple of things come up as you mentioned that. One is that, and I have personal experience with this as an athlete, particularly in a sport, baseball, where it's very one dimensional in terms of rotation. In other words, we're going one way all the time.
Yeah.
So there's no counterbalance. And so this distortion, this imbalance that sets in over time after this years of conditioning, right, with really violent movements, it started to create this twisting. And so what I've noticed in that is that once dysfunction and imbalance starts to set in, you're compounding it unless you're sort of accidentally or actively counteracting it. It will continue to get worse. It'll continue to get more and more imbalanced. Imagine, if I were to build a Jenga tower, right, and it's perfectly set, right, we're good, it's strong, I can put tons of weight on it, like thousands of pounds if it's perfectly aligned. Once it starts getting a little bit more little misaligned, then its strength, its durability becomes less. Now we continue that, right? And so this is what happens in the body. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. The second is, um, a big student of Ayurveda. And one of the huge core tenets of Ayurveda when it comes to health and well-being and resetting balance in the body is this idea of ama, or so this toxic waste, this stuff that builds up in the body. And generally, not always, but most of it starts from the gut and migrates into various tissues of the body, right? The joints, right? The interstitium, cellular, the extracellular matrix, inside the cells. Plus, we have metabolism going on in every cell of the body, generating waste. So there's a real need. In order to stay healthy, we have to remove waste constantly because we're actively participating in life at the cellular level and at the sort of macro level. So this idea of moving waste out of the body, and then of course getting nutrients in, like we sort of conceptualize that. That's sort of an obvious thing. But I think a lot of times we don't think about how do I get that cellular waste product from these bunch of cells in my big toe on my left foot? How do I get that out of the body? Right. And so we have these mechanisms with the fascia, with the extracellular matrix, with the interstitium. There are ways of moving this stuff primarily through fluid matrix sort of stuff, right? But as this sort of constriction, these adhesions start to set in, that becomes difficult. And so, in with somebody that has food sensitivities, immune imbalances and dysfunctions, this is happening. We have built up of ama, of waste, all throughout the body, and we got to get rid of it. In order to restore good, immune balance and function, we got to continue to get rid of this stuff. And to me, this is why I wanted to have you on, is because this is one of the most effective ways to sort of melt these adhesions in the bodies, these mechanical blocks that are preventing flow of nutrients in and out and waste out, um, and starting to open up and create this fluidity, right? We say that stagnation is death, right? So we need to do the opposite. We need to create flow. So to me, again, those are two big things that sort of jump out. This idea of once dysfunction and imbalance sets in, it's kind of a one-way track unless we actively sort of reverse that and address it. And two, ama, and part of that is ama waste will continue to build up outside of the gut in peripheral aspects of the body, the brain, the heart, the liver, everywhere, right? So we need to do whatever we can to shuttle those out of the body.
Well, and this takes me back to my 20s when I was training to be an athletic therapist in university. So we're trained like physiotherapists to work with elite athletes. And here I am working like a fiend, running, Tae Bo, 400 sit ups a day, doing the weights, dieting. I'm 50 pounds overweight at the time. And it's like, why are the rules of weight loss not working for me? And then I started this journey, and one of the big things I recognized is I'm not properly breathing.
Mm,
Years later, they've now shared that 84% of weight loss comes through proper exhalation because of the detoxifying effects that the breath provides for us. So that was my personal experience, and I was so excited when that came out because the very first moment for me that tapped into this whole understanding was when I was having an anxiety attack. And I never touched this area of my body because it was where I stored all of my sighs, and I was so ashamed of it. There was a lot of emotional baggage that came with that. So now here I am moving my hand deeply into my abdomen, amidst this anxiety attack. And the first thing I encountered was pain. But the pain brought me back into my body and I recognized I was breathing. And then for the next 30, 45 minutes, I was just intuitively exploring in this tissue. And what was so fascinating, as an athletic therapist, I always focused on deep tissue work and I was really good at navigating scar tissue. So here I am for the first time in this space. And I hadn't had injury or surgery in this particular area, but it was marbled with what felt like scar tissue. And that was where I really started this understanding of the fact that it's the adhesions that get created over time from that lack of understanding how to navigate our bodies properly. I was the high powered volleyball, hitter, and how many times I rotated. I was also a high level Highland dancer, creating a turnout. All of these things that I did to my body, thinking, I'm an athlete and I'm all of these things, turned out to be the worst things for me because of that negative patterning. So I've spent my life undoing that patterning and creating this work so that people can really understand how to get into those dense areas. And they're dense. They will seal up to bone with a force of up to 2,000 pounds per square inch, locking us out of alignment. But it's magnetic. So it's understanding how to release magnets. When magnets are far enough apart, they have no attraction to each other. Bring them close together and they'll seal with the force, and try to pull them apart, impossible, but we can shear them apart. So this whole process of fascia decompression that we'll be sharing is teaching you how to move through the layers of fascia, shearing those deeper adhesions, creating heat with pressure over time, combined with turning on your body's furnace, diaphragmatic breathing. And when you combine those two, we're very efficient at getting through those patterns that we've fallen into and bringing the body back into balance through one of our parts as well is teaching people proper postural foundations.
That's beautiful. And I should mention here too that Deanna and her team have offered this audience a 20% discount on a starter pack. And so can you just show what some of those blocks, you got them behind you.
Yeah,
Maybe you can just bring them a
absolutely.
little closer. And Deanna's going to show us an example of how to do some of this work that she teaches with a towel too. So you don't have to have this. That's the cool part. But I will say it's a bit of a different experience with these blocks. They are super effective. And
Yeah,
so,
it
yeah,
sure
give
is.
us an indication of what that is and how kind of how it's used.
Yeah, so this is the Block Buddy. This is the original. It's very specifically shaped. This is the baby. Initially, this was for people over 5 feet. This was for kids. Having both of them, amazing. I even have a lot of double blocking classes. The reason that they're made of wood, and they're actually made of elm wood. Our trees here from Winnipeg, I have a factory here. Dutch elm disease has basically taken out these beautiful old 100-year-old trees, and they used to chip the tree away because the disease is in the bark. So we now are using this beautiful material to create healing tools for people all over the world. But what's so important to understand is because fascia will grip to bone with that 2,000 pound per square inch seal, we need something similar in density to bone to be able to navigate moving through the layers because we want to get to the root of the issue. When we do other things like rolling on the surface with fascial rollers that are more porous, that will provide surface stimulation, but it's not going to get to the root at the bone. And that's the reason the tools are made of what they are. Now, having said that, when I take you through this little journey, rolling up a towel nice and dense, and I'll show you how to do that, it does the trick to really teach you what this work is about so that you get a nice deep understanding of what fascia decompression can do for your body. And then if you choose to go to the next step, those are next level for sure.
So before we get into sort of this demonstration, I want to, you have, for people who aren't familiar with block therapy and Deanna's work, just go to our website. You can see unbelievable transformation photos, experiences that people have had. It's wild. Like the testimonials are insane. But talk to me about some of the things that you hear, right? So obviously there's going to be structural improvements, right? Spine, but like give us an idea of some of the stuff that you wouldn't expect. Like how we can get into fascia and it can change like almost every aspect of our well-being.
It really can because when we understand what triggers the negative alignment, then we can understand how to undo and bring our body back to balance and health. And because it's trauma, it can be an emotional event. So it can be something when I was 3 years old and I witnessed something that terrifies me. And again, when we hold the breath, that's that reactive measure to keep the inside vulnerable area of the body safe and protected. But if now I'm locked like this and I'm 3 years old, and then I start aging from this perspective and I don't have this muscle pulling optimal oxygen in to support my growth and development, likely down the road, I'm going to have some kind of autoimmune disease. I will likely have issues with handling emotional things. So like whatever terms people end up having, whether it's depression or bipolar, whatever it is, when the nervous system isn't regulated because we don't have a proper breath, everything down the road becomes problematic. How we use our body, how we sleep, how we even perceive life. The thing is, if we go back and we've healed a trauma, we can go back to that traumatic moment and we can oftentimes see the blessing as opposed to the trauma. I've done
Right.
that many times through my life. And that's the beautiful thing, because even the emotion gets stuck and tied into those adhesions. So when we start doing fascia decompression and we open up the body and we connect the breath to move the negative components out through proper exhalation, that can be emotion, it can be memory. So not only are we changing how we use our body, how we look, how we function, how we feel, but also how we live in our body in this life. This fascia, this beautiful container that our soul is gifted to exist in, it can be terrifying or it can be absolutely amazing. And if we have restriction, blocking flow, blocking light, keeping toxins inside our body and inflammation, then it's going to be an existence where we're basically trying to manage pain and the challenges that life brings to us, as opposed to seeing what creatively we can do to improve the quality of the people on the planet.
And I'm going to say too, when it comes to trauma, right? You mentioned kind of an example, right? Which is of one of thousands of types of trauma, but this is very common, right? Something happening at one, two, or three, we don't even have memories of this usually, right?
Yeah.
So then we grow up our entire life and we don't even really understand what is happening. Oftentimes we can get stuff passed through us in gestation, right? Things that we pick up from family, right? There's something. I don't even know what words to use. I mean, the scientist in me would say quantum, the more spiritual one would say karmic and spiritual. Like there's stuff happening beyond the veil, things that we can't comprehend with our mind, and our body somehow stores this, and the fascia seem to be a miraculous aspect of this. Water, fascia, the nervous system, there is something more happening. And so I just want to sort of name that a lot of the quote unquote trauma that our body is holding, our mind doesn't understand. Our memory doesn't have it readily available. And here's what's wild is that anybody who's gone through chronic disease, it's been dealing with stuff for a long time, that itself becomes the trauma. You go through a mold exposure and dealing with that for a year and all the things that come up with that, the body gets conditioned to the threat response. So that's really all for me. Like we can just boil it down to that: is the body conditioned for threat? And
Yeah.
and mental emotional trauma will do this, right? The capital T traumas, right? The sexual abuses and the physical abuse and the neglect, like those, obviously. But then it's other things. Kids making fun of me in school. It's the perception from parents that I had to be perfect in order to receive love. There's so many aspects of these things that get held within our system. And again, some of it may not even come from me. It might be my culture, might be the geography, might be family, might be karmic. Like there's stuff going on. And what's wild is that just with these silly little blocks and doing a few little things, this stuff starts to move. And I would say that when things are moving naturally without any sort of effort, perhaps intention, but not really any effort, the body's doing what it does, and these releases are cathartic. They feel amazing. So you could be weeping, you have no idea why, perhaps, and it's like, like a weight is lifted, right? And then other
Yeah.
times, nothing obvious is happening, but yet still things are moving, right? So this is what I think is so cool. And what I think my favorite part about sort of, let's say, processing energies like this is that they're sort of little surprises. They're sort of little gifts. And you don't know when you're going to get them, right? And you just kind of open a package one day and go, what the hell was that? And somehow it translates into your life, both on the
Yes.
physical health side, the mental health side, the sort of working model with which you see the world, right? It all starts to shift. And that's what's so crazy. Again, with these silly little blocks, I say it so lovingly, our world can change. And that seems so wild.
One of the things that I love is in one of Greg Braden's books, The God Code, he shares that on the surface layer of every cell, the message is God lies within. So if we have a body riddled with scar tissue and adhesion, we may be only connecting to 10, 20, 30% of the cells available. When we start doing this work and melting those adhesions and awakening cells previously blocked from life, we start to hear their message. And that's where that spiritual component I find is so beautiful. God lives in the space. So this work is really about putting optimal space in and around every cell. And then we can hear those messages. We have a deeper connection to our higher self with this work as well. So
Mhm.
that's one of the things that I love. When you start diving into your body, that's the entertainment. We don't need to be entertaining ourselves
Yeah.
externally. We have a whole lifetime and lifetimes past of information that we can tap into and close our eyes and just get involved with ourselves. And it's so beautiful
Yeah.
and exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think maybe go ahead and start diving in and getting into some of this. One thing I want to say as you're starting this process is that in my experience, no matter what we're working with on the health side, mental, emotional, physical, it's really important to get in the body, to become embodied. And for a long time, I didn't know what that meant. I knew it from the mind, and it took me a while to really understand what it means to be embodied. And this is one of those tools, not the only, but this is one of those tools that I think helps people get into the body with awareness, with the breath, and with that physical sensation that, in this case, a towel, but more appropriately, I think the block buddy and the can provide. It's helping us
Yeah.
get into the body.
Yes, it sure is. So I'll just share with everybody how to roll their towel up. So you want to have a nice bath towel. You just want to fold it first in half and then in half again. And then you just want to roll it up so it's nice and dense. And the nice thing about this is if any position I take you into is too intense with it fully rolled up, you can just take out some of the height and make it less intense. I am going to just wrap this so it doesn't unroll on me. Now, there's only two rules in this work. The first rule is we stay a minimum of 3 minutes because we can't rush melting. The second one is your breath is your guide. As long as you're breathing in a relaxed way, you're feeding and healing the area. If you're breathing in a stressed way, that's your body saying this is too intense. And then we can take out some of that roll, or you can even do it on a bed. Now, the only thing is if you're pregnant or if you're having any kind of major herniations through here, start with the very first position, lying on your back instead of on your belly. And then I'm going to take you through 7 positions. Now, before we start, I just want all of you just to take your shoulder through a range of motion just to see where you're starting from. And then I'm going to do the first 3 positions, and then we're going to go back to this and see what kind of change we've made. Okay,
And
so
just remind us too, what
yeah.
is sort of the goal? What's the objective of what we're doing today? What's this going to do for us?
So a couple of things. The first thing it's going to do, because we're spending time teaching you how to breathe properly, we're going to start activating the diaphragm. And the positions that we're going to be doing here will help unlock the patterning from past trauma. Even the adhesions on the rib cage lock the diaphragm from use like a frozen shoulder. Most people have a frozen diaphragm. So we need to open up this area to be able to really optimize the breath. When we breathe diaphragmatically, we feed the body 6 times the oxygen. And also, again, we are improving that detoxification through the proper exhalation. So we're also going to be melting through layers in through here to activate your lymphatic system to bring heat and energy in here so we can start to move waste more effectively out of the body, as well as improve absorption, liver health, metabolic health, all of that stuff.
And this is spleen, this is pancreas, like these is kidneys. This is really critical for digestion, for detoxification, for all the things that we're actually going to need that we tend to try to do with supplements, right? Or other methods. And like we got to get into those systems and sort of like kind of mess with them a little bit. We got to loosen them
Yeah.
up, right? They're so compacted and so restricted We got to loosen it up because again, it's that fascia. It's those networks of waste removal, of getting energy in, right? And to the chi and the prana, right? Like we got to get stuff flowing.
And a couple of other positive side effects. If you feel that you've gone through some aging and you have a bit of a spare tire, it's not accumulated fat, it's compression and ballooning. So we're going to start to lift the rib cage up, and oftentimes people, their height improves because we're taking away what's holding us and locking us down, and we start to lift and become the tallest version of ourselves.
Mm, that's awesome.
All right. So to begin, towel right on the belly button you'll be lying on here. And we're going to be in this position for, again, approximately 3 minutes. So when you get in, you can stay up on your elbows. And to begin, we just want to focus on inhaling into the towel. This is teaching us where the breath should be coming from. And unless you can't, breathe in and out through the nose.
And these are full inhale and exhales, or is this a calm, relaxed breathing?
It's a calm, relaxed breath, but we want it to be in the full range. So if you can hear yourself breathing, see if you can pull back so it's not as forced. Now, you may feel pain, you may feel a pulse, pressure. These are all normal sensations. But again, as long as you can breathe in that relaxed way, that's a positive thing.
I think for me, when I explored this position for the first time, it wasn't a pain. But it was a significant discomfort. In other words, like, I don't like this. This doesn't really
Yeah,
feel good to like poke and prod those organs in there, right? And this is for me with the block buddy. But like again, I think maybe you can chat too about the relationship to pain or discomfort and how this can sort of retrain or recondition us in that regard.
absolutely. We're actually teaching you to make pain your friend. Pain is really just like the baby crying. It's a signal from the cell that it doesn't have what it needs to function and thrive on your behalf. It doesn't have space, it doesn't have hydration, nutrition, rest, love, all of the things that we as a human need to thrive. The cell is just a little mini version of us as a human being. So let's now, for this last minute or so, shift our attention to the exhalation phase of the breath. Allow your body weight and gravity to do the work so you feel the towel sinking nice and deeply into this core space. And let's even exhale for a longer count than we inhale. And even if you can, after that full exhalation, stay in that space of no breath just to get really familiar with that deeper sensation inside your core. And then take your inhale as you need. And we'll just take 3 more slow exhales here.
Eh,
And what
eh,
you'll find too is that the pain will change. The
Yeah.
pressure fibers in your body are larger than the pain fibers. So as you activate them, the sensation of pain changes to be one that's generally expressed as a good pain.
Yeah, and I find too, as long as it's not so, I mean, there's extreme pains where you can't handle it and you're trying to push through it. That's not what we're looking for here, right? We're looking for more like
Not at all. No,
discomfort and that
force,
slight
we
pain,
want
right?
persuasion versus force. We want to
Right.
persuade the body, not force it.
And when we're in that position, what I've noticed is there's a sort of active participation on in my part where I can re-engage that pain from a different mental place. In other words, this is uncomfortable. Interesting. In other words, oh my God, this sucks. I don't like it. How much longer? Right? Like there's a panic sort of
Yeah.
way to deal with it, and that may be habituated or conditioned when it comes to pain and the mind. And then there's this other thing that we can sort of retrain where it's like, okay, I'm safe. Yeah, this is uncomfortable. Like this
And
is
that's
really
connecting to
interesting.
that breath piece. So let's put your hands under your shoulders and slowly exhale up and out of position. And before we even dive into the next two positions, just notice right now how you feel. I definitely feel energy and warmth in here. And that brings my attention from my crazy brain into my body. So right away, I've turned on my parasympathetic nervous system from that activity of the diaphragm. I'm already feeling a sense of calm. And that's the thing, we get caught in a pain fear loop. So by moving into pain on purpose and then seeing the positive side effects from that, the fear gets taken from the equation. So pain is simply a sensation that we have a tool to address and to move through.
And the way you feel now, now you're starting to create a positive feedback loop of, oh,
Yes.
this discomfort and pain results in something really good. So
Yeah.
then you're starting to change this relationship with pain. It's almost like that this, and I hesitate to even use the word pain because it's really a discomfort, right? It's like it can be a significant discomfort. But these little pain points start to become almost the pathway to pleasure.
Yes, exactly. I love that. The next position we're going to do is the left lower rib. So for the ladies, just under the breast tissue. Now we're on these lower ribs. Right here is the stomach organ. So again, anybody with issues with food sensitivity, this is going to be a really important one. This is also where the aorta leaves the heart, the main artery. If we're situated in this negative alignment, I'm now crashing down on this stomach organ. I've taken the aorta and I've created a twist, so now my heart has to work harder. So now I could have any number of issues with my heart, high blood pressure, anxiety, because now my body is again in that mode where it's like, holy smokes, I'm trying to send blood through this tube, but I've got all this restriction. So this next position, we're going to address that. So getting in, just same as the other position, gently lie in that space. Take the opposite leg. So I'm taking my right leg out to the side and I am simply lowering myself into that position, and take your time so that you can get familiar with how it feels to have pressure in this space. We actually have a ton of internal pressure in this space, but it's a different sensation when you're approaching it from the outside of the body. And then as you start to sink in a little bit, let's be sure to connect into that full exhale. So again, breathing in and out through the nose, and feel the belly lift up into the core with the exhale and relax with the inhale. Oftentimes people are breathing in reverse. So part of this training is teaching people how to breathe properly.
Yeah, for me, this is like an embodied meditation, breath work kind of practice. And again, retraining the pain loops, um, and creating space in the body. And what I think is cool is that you can sort of make these micro adjustments with the body, changing the position of the knee, adding a little bit more of your weight, working with gravity a little bit more, and you start shifting the body subtly, and you can start to kind of find these little spots where you really need to work or you want to work. And so that's what's really cool. It becomes this self-exploratory practice that is sort of in these guidelines provided by Deanna, her team, and the structure of the classes. But this becomes again like once I started getting familiar with this, it became my own practice, kind of like yoga, you could say. It's like you start to learn the rules, learn how it goes, and then it's yours. It's this art and science of exploring your own body with this technique.
And what's fun too is when we can start actively bringing those twists, that
Yeah.
shearing action in, that's how we release those more superficial layers of adhesion so we can start to dive more deeply. And then another thing that we want to do, especially when we're working the rib cage, is with the inhale, feel the ribs expand with the inhale. So you want to inhale into the towel. That's going to help to navigate this melting to optimize proper diaphragmatic breathing.
Mm.
So I'm just going to spend another minute here. So you can just see I'm just slowly moving around. Where there's pain, there's adhesion. So pain essentially becomes your roadmap because we fell out of alignment due to pain, whether emotional, mental, physical, spiritual. That's how our breath became compromised. So now we're looking and searching for those areas of density, of pain, so that we can spend some time. Pressure over time creates that melting effect and pump blood and life back into this space that was a holding pattern for that negative fascial alignment. 3 more exhales here. And really imagine that all of the toxins that you're pulling up from those deeper tissues with that full exhale are moving out of the body. And then when you're ready, let's be really thoughtful. Whenever we come up off of these floating ribs, we want to take our time, have a nice full inhale, and then gently exhale up and off of the ribs. And then I'm going to go into that next position, which is the upper side rib position. Important because when we fall out of alignment, The shoulder blades adhere to the ribs, locking us into this heaviness. So we want to release this space right here. So about nipple height, you're going to slide it over to the side. And we are simply going to be on our side here. You can support your head in your hand to begin, and then just begin by gently rocking forward and backward just to get familiar with the sensations. You can also place your hand on your abdomen just to ensure the breath is coming from the right place. When you inhale, the belly becomes big. When you exhale, we squeeze the belly small.
What I noticed as going through a variety of the positions with the legs and the neck and the shoulder, like all around the body, was that it gave me a way to explore and understand my own body. There were places where I would use the block button and I'm like, oh, this feels really good. In other words, I knew I needed it and it felt good. There were other places, like when I would put it in between my calves and my hamstrings and sort of sit down on my knees, that like were excruciating. And I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
like this is a different experience here. And so, and then my wife, when she does that, and she's like, oh yeah, it feels kind of good, you know? And so it starts to really get you familiar with where are your, real restrictions that are sort of out of your sight, out of your mind. You don't really know. And this idea of trying to stretch our way out of this mess um, is just not going to work, right? Maybe you can just
No,
speak to that real quick. Like, why doesn't, like, just if I just stretching and I love yoga, yoga's fantastic. But why are some of those types, Pilates, yoga, stretching, why doesn't that get to sort of these deeper levels of fascial compression?
it's that magnetic seal of the adhesions locking us on the bone. So right now, if I take my right arm into whatever range of motion I have and I stretch, it's going to get recoiled back into its current alignment because even your feet are part of the equation of the holding pattern of the whole body. And stretching isn't going to release that seal from the bone when we're doing this work. And just you'll see now, I'm going to go a little more deeply here. So now I'm leaning my body in. So for the ladies, you're going to feel that outer portion of your breast tissue getting compressed. But what I'm doing here, I can take my left hand and I can lift it off the floor. I'm going to take you through some movement. So your breath is your guide. Again, I don't want you moving into anything or forcing. But as I open up the space and I'm holding with the breath, I'm pulling up the deeper adhesions that you wouldn't access through stretching alone. And because I'm spending time with them with the breath, again, pressure over time creates melting. And we're shearing through the action so that we can get right at the bone to release the tissue. So now you have more tissue to lengthen because we've released part of that holding pattern that wouldn't let go with the stretch alone.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, this is once I discovered this, Deanna, I was like, every athlete should be doing this. Everybody that has a yoga practice or any other kind of practice that they enjoy doing, moving their body, can benefit from this. In other words, their practice is going to get better. Like everything that one uses their body for will
Yes.
improve, you know,
And
let
just lean into
alone
the top hand and exhale up.
let alone the health side, right? And again, this isn't the is not so obvious, but as you unlock the body, the things that will just naturally happen with your health and well-being is remarkable.
So now let's just take that left arm and let's just notice the increase in range. Notice the quality of the motion. And now do that same thing with that right shoulder. And I mean, remember, we haven't even touched the shoulder. And that's part of the understanding. If I'm trying to increase the range of motion in my shoulder and I'm working my shoulder to access it, when our holding pattern is down through here, and that's also directed by your feet, we're never going to get to the result that we're looking for. So I'm going to do the same two positions now on the right side. So we're going to be right on top of the liver. So for anybody with fatty liver disease, think of butter at room temperature versus heating it. It melts. So when we have fatty liver disease, the liver's cold because if we're not breathing diaphragmatically, we're not giving the energy to this space. So the combination of lying on the towel as we connect to the breath, we're getting a heating from the outside and the inside to start melting those fats in the liver to improve liver function.
And in Ayurveda, we call this Agni, this idea of digestion, the ability for the body to process, metabolize, digest. And that is sort of a function of heat. and movement. So this type of, the liver is kind of the seat of Agni. Right? This is a huge aspect of metabolization, and so I love the idea of working the outside to improve the metabolic function of the inside.
And also just interesting to note how different both sides feel.
Yeah, yeah,
First of all, we're on different organs, but also we're anything but symmetrical. So
yes,
the
it's
goal
true.
is to bring balance and symmetry to the body.
Yeah, I've noticed this in huge ways, and it's really interesting.
And then what I always say to people, I love if you close your eyes, first of all, you're already connected more deeply in your body because you're not dealing with what your eyes are seeing and having to process that. So when you move inward with your eyes closed and you slow that breath down, it becomes so beautiful and meditative. And I say to people, if you can imagine you're hanging out in the ocean and you're just going with the flow with the movements. Again,
Mm.
we want to seek out where the pain is because that's the goal is we want to find those dense areas and melt through the pain, but it just becomes this beautiful exploration of your own body. And that's the fun part. What comes up? Is it emotion? Is it memory? Is it pain? All of these things that are locked deeper inside than what we're consciously aware of, we start tapping into. And as you said, Jason, you really start to learn about your own body through this journey.
Yeah, and the practice of embodiment, from my perspective, is really about using our awareness, right? So as you're doing this practice, for me, it becomes about being one with the breath, right? So almost like the breath is breathing me, and then feeling into these areas, right? So like actually feeling the pain or the discomfort, feeling the organ system, feeling the adhesion. Like use your awareness to track that sensation, to feel it. So you're kind of actually getting into the body with your awareness. And when you do that, the mind isn't so scattered. It's not so hyper vigilant, right? So it's really a practice of getting out of the mind into the sensation, into the body, into the feeling, what while breathing, right? Like and again, the breath is sort of breathing you when you really harmonize with it. And so this is a practice, like the actual practice of embodiment is this, because so many of us are habituated in the mind, right? In
And when
thought.
you're ready to come up and out, let's be really thoughtful about first inhaling and then slowly exhaling up and off the towel. And Jason, what I love about this is if you are being bullied, that's something that you will fear. If you suddenly make friends with the bully, there's nothing to fear. So this is about becoming friends with your pain, with those negative sensations. And then what traps us in that pain fear spiral, we remove that fear. And then again, we're just now dealing with sensation.
Mm.
So I'm thinking just for the time factor, probably we'll just do this last one position so we're nice and balanced. So again, about nipple height, we're going to slide right over. And again, just enjoy what comes up for you. And when we're doing this work, we want to be comfortable everywhere else except what we're actively seeking. So that's part of this as well. Everybody has different pain thresholds. Oftentimes, we think that the strong athlete is going to have the best pain threshold, when in fact, it can oftentimes be people that have been struggling with chronic pain and immobility because they're so used to handling pain. So that's what makes this also so accessible to everybody. You can do this in bed. You can do it seated on a chair if you struggle getting up and down from the floor. You can take it to a very different level, adding isometric work in to make it more of an exercise in the moment, or it can be just a restorative, lovely, gentle practice as you're tapping in. So it becomes whatever you need it to be, which is also such a lovely piece of this. Now, if you're choosing to go a little deeper, you can bring that top leg to the floor, straighten the bottom leg, and then walk that hand to the top of the mat to really extend and allow yourself to sink a little more deeply. And even a little more advanced now is that isometric holding. If you can imagine, if my arm is down, how much tissue adhesion I'm connecting to, but now I bring my arm up into a stretch and hold, I'm pulling those deeper adhesions to meet the towel or the block. And then as I continue to open up and go deeper in that space, I'm accessing the areas that you never get to with just stretching.
And talk to me about how this practice, you could say, progresses. Because what I've noticed is that um, things sort of get easier. You get more open, these type of things, and sort of in an almost contradictory way, new things pop up, and you're like, oh my god, this is in other words, it's never ending. You know?
It's never ending. We're going backward through time in our tissue, which is lovely. So you're going to find that injury that you sustained when you were 10 years old and the injury that you had when you were 3 year old. We continue to move through those layers to get to those deeper traumas from the past. And that's also what makes it so exciting. Healing is not a linear journey.
Yes.
We're we are always wanting to work toward improvement, but there are moments when we feel, wow, I feel great. I feel open and spacious, and everything feels wonderful and clean. And then you go deeper and you unravel a whole layer of toxicity that got trapped in the layers that down the road could create something really negative. But now you're experiencing it so you can let it out in the moment. And that's the fun part because I mean, I'm 26 years in now, and I continue to find areas from my past that I'm feeling and remembering the time I fell on my knee when I was, in grade 4. Like all of these things come to the surface so that we can recreate the scenario and heal from a different perspective with intention. And when you're ready now, just lean into that top hand, exhale up, and then let's just check in and see if we have some nicer range. All right.
So as we wrap up here, Deanna, I'd love for you to just give me an overview of some of these things that people have reported to you and your staff um, improvements on, healing from, things like autoimmune conditions, spinal deformities, like you name it, like chronic pain, obviously is a big
Yeah.
one. But talk to me about just some of the stories. And again, we're not sort of saying that this is going to cure or do any of that, but what are some of these reports that you've heard?
Well, a really exciting one. I'm going to actually be doing an interview with one of our instructors next week. She had both Ehlers-Danlos as well as lipedema,
Wow.
and she no longer has the markers for Ehlers-Danlos and her lipedema. Incredible changes. We will be sharing her before and after pictures and talk about her journey along the way. People with autoimmune disease, people with Parkinson's, MS, getting mobility back, people with drastic acute injury that we're healing. I've done some crazy work with some individuals that had brain injury. Uh, like it's so fascinating and fun. I mean, I had one woman that lost 102 pounds in 1 year of blocking. Now that's not typical, but I had her on an interview talking about that. So it's anything and everything, and it doesn't matter how old you are either. I work with children. We have people in their 90s starting. We have people that haven't been mobile in their lives, and we have high level athletes getting improvement. So I mean,
Yeah.
you name it. When we're talking fascia, because it innervates every single tissue and cell, everything has an involvement in fascia, in what's going on that's negative as well as positive.
Yeah, I mean, I've really grown to think about the fascia as like almost like it's the starting matrix of the body, and muscles are just inside of fascia. Bones are inside of fascia. Organs are inside of fascia. So if you just think about the fascia as the living matrix that is, in other words, your body is fascia. Start there. And then all
Yeah.
these other things are sort of wrapped up in it and tucked away in it, right? Like that's how I've started to think about it. Everything is fascia. There is no place in the body where you're not going to find fascia. It's everywhere, even down to the
And
cellular
that's what
level.
I love about the topic about, I don't even like using the word disease because to me, disease is a permanent thing
It's
that
a
we
thing,
are
yeah.
dealing with, where when we have dis-ease, we are a container with parts, but we are also this fluid living matrix. And when we can see that what creates issues with any tissue, organ, muscle, whatever it is, it's blockage. It's that area not getting properly fed and clean, and then it goes through its journey of descent. So when we can see the body with that perspective, there's nothing that can't be improved through getting rid of those blockages and supporting proper diaphragmatic breathing, which is really your body's engine and furnace to keep
Yeah.
your body nice and heated.
Yeah, and so again, I encourage people to go to blocktherapy.com and just look at the transformation uh, photos that you'll see. People look younger, they're more upright, they're more balanced. I mean, losing weight, skin improvements,
Cellulite?
cellulite disappearing, right?
Yeah.
And again, I want to, from my perspective, we're removing waste from the body, we're creating more space, we're allowing more oxygen, life force energy to get throughout the body. We're improving sleep. Anytime you improve sleep, you improve every dis-ease, every imbalance, right? Every dysfunction. So
Yeah.
there's a number of mechanisms here that can explain why using these blocks can help MS, Parkinson's, chronic fatigue, autoimmune conditions, right? Physical issues, you name it, skin issues, right? Hair falling out, right? Like it's wild. Once you start creating more flow, opening things up, getting better sleep, eliminating toxins and waste from the body, then everything starts to happen better. Like it's kind of that simple, but the process is a little bit unusual. Like we don't think about it in this way of how we can sort of break up these adhesions, and that's going to unlock the healing.
At 56 now, I've never in my life had hair this long or this full. So, that's the fun part. As we get older, I also did an interview recently with a 72-year-old, one of my instructors, and she is just excited because she's aging younger. And
Yeah.
I love that, the way she put it. She's like, I'm no longer afraid of falling. She doesn't have the curve in her spine anymore. She's strong footed. She doesn't have that hip pain anymore. So that's the beautiful part. And because this is only, I mean, again, I started developing this 26 years ago, but this is a new thing in the world. Who knows what that means for the people doing it? Because at the end of the day, compression creates pain, aging, dis-ease, and ultimately death. So when we're doing a practice that pulls your body into the opposite direction, decompression, what does that mean for us? I guess we'll see.
Yeah, and I mean, this is one of those things that I think about, man, if I only had this in my sort of high school days into college when I was playing baseball and injuries were starting to crop up, had I known, had I had this awareness and had I had the discipline to actually, execute it, I think this would have been life-changing for me in every aspect. And so I think with that, there's no better time to start than now, no matter how old you are. You can unwind just about everything. I mean, that's so cool. I mean, the body is so miraculous, and I
Yeah.
continuously get amazed at what it's capable of recovering from, of how we can unwind and turn back the clock and restore youth. The vitality is there. The wisdom of the body is there. We just have to unlock it. So, Deanna, again, thank you so much for coming on and showing us this demonstration. And again, I want to mention her team is offering 20% off of the starter pack, which includes instructional videos, right? So you get
Yes.
the Block Buddy, the Block Baby, which by the way, I use both of those. The Block Baby is great for travel, right? Because it's so small, but even the bigger one is easy to travel with. But I use
Yep.
them for different aspects. Like I'll stand on them, to work the bottom of my feet. Use them in my sort of calves and hamstrings in different ways. The neck, like there's all kinds of cool ways that you can do that. And your instructional videos are fantastic, by the way, so easy to follow.
Thank you. And one of my favorite positions is the side waist. I never had a waist when I was so compressed and ballooned. So I've
Got some
created
space.
that. And that's where having different size tools feels nice because
Yeah,
this can be pretty intense for some people, where this little guy in areas on the rib cage can be more intense than this one. So again, having both is a wonderful opportunity if you can.
absolutely. Again, blocktherapy.com. Deanna, thanks so much. Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Jason. It's been so much fun.
If you've missed any of the groundbreaking presentations so far, you can now get instant access to the entire summit at a special 67% discount. Not only will you receive lifetime access to all 15 expert video interviews that you can watch anytime on any device, you'll also receive MP3s and PDF transcripts for each presentation. Plus, you're getting over $1,200 in exclusive bonuses. Just click the button on this page to take advantage of this limited time offer so you can watch, listen, and read anytime you like. Dr. Sonda Moldovan, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So this is a conversation I've been wanting to have because I feel like this dentistry angle is really, I'd say it's like the redheaded stepchild, if I can sort of impugn myself here, of the health world. Like nobody's talking about this in a way that I feel is um, really enough to make a difference. And I would say I would classify you as a holistic dentist. Do I have that right? Would you classify yourself in any other way?
Interesting you say that, because I also have a podcast called the Holistic Dentistry Show. A lot of the general public identifies with the holistic. However, when I talk to the dental community, they don't like that word.
Yeah.
So I call it integrative dentistry because we're integrating aspects from nutrition, oral microbiome, supplementation, lifestyle. We're integrating all that.
Right.
So
it's a little less woo-woo crystal world, right?
Exactly.
Which is kind of holistic,
yes.
Right? Which, yeah, I agree. But at the same time, I would say that the internet sort of world, or the people who kind of talk about this, it's still this holistic dentist is kind of the mainframe sort of verbiage, I guess you could say, out there.
Yes.
And there's an organization, is IOAMT, is that right?
Yes, IAOMT.
IAOMT, yeah.
And IABDM.
Okay, and what are these?
The International Association for Oral Medicine and Toxicology, which I'm a member of.
And that was kind of like the I would say the gold standard or premier organization that I learned about in this sort of holistic dentistry world.
Yes, and that's the biological dentist.
Okay. Yes.
That's another word for holistic.
That's right. That would be another one. So there's the holistic dentist, biological dentist. These are kind of referring to the same thing.
Yes.
I like what you're doing, trying to get this into the more integrative world, because to me that takes it a step further, which is to say that we're not just focusing on the mouth. The mouth is not its own thing. It is integrated into the rest of somebody's health and their body, and we need to look at the whole thing. Even a dentist, in my view, would benefit from understanding what the microbiome is, how the nervous system works, how the whole system works, how breathing impacts these things, right? So it's really this idea of starting to branch out and become cross-disciplinary, which is it's a challenging road ahead, I think, that we have, but a necessary one.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so needed. I started this path 20 years ago, basically from my own struggles with my own health. And then I went on the path of learning about nutrition. I ran into the Institute for Functional Medicine and I took their courses.
Nice.
And
that's great.
That's how it all started for me.
Yeah. And so I'm going to take you back to my realization of this level of dentistry, which came from Weston A. Price and the foundation there. And I started to recognize, okay, it's the teeth. The teeth matter. Teeth are a part of our body, right? They're not just these things that float around or just lodged in our jaw, but they're playing a functional role. There's a communication. There's a rebuilding of teeth. I even regrew my own dentin. I had some a cavity and I actually regrew the dentin using some of these principles.
Absolutely.
And then, but I also realized that I needed to remove my mercury amalgam fillings, the silver fillings that many of us from the 70s and 80s had as kids. And what I didn't realize at the time was that there's actually a really important process to that, and that it can be done incorrectly, which can cause problems in that moment, or the weeks or months leading after that, regarding sort of repoisoning yourself, right? If it's not done correctly. So that was my sort of foray into biological dentistry, holistic dentistry. And then I realized, okay, well, this is important. This is the level of dentistry that I'm going to commit to instead of just standard dentistry. But even in that world, I recognize there were certain levels of understanding with regards to this integrative care. And in fact, I ran into a holistic biological dentist who wanted just to remove teeth because my teeth were crowded. And I still had my wisdom teeth, I still do. And he wanted to remove, because I had crowding, he wanted to remove one of my front teeth. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're a biological dentist, you're a member of IAOMT. So I thought you had this understanding that we can't just remove teeth just because there's crowding. And so that had me recognize, okay, I need to find a good holistic, good biological dentist. How do I do that? So that's my question to you is, how does one, if they want to get sort of the gold standard of dental care, how does somebody figure out what a good biological dentist looks like and sort of interview them and find the one that's going to work for them?
Yeah, I think you bring up such a good point, because I have a lot of patients that come in and say, I saw this dentist, they called themselves holistic, but they were using fluoride.
Right.
And we know fluoride is a neurotoxin, actually. So It doesn't belong in a true holistic or biological practice. So I think it comes down to, as a patient, interviewing the dentist.
And what kind of questions would they ask, or how would they sort through that?
I think we got to start with the basic, okay, the kind of things they have in their office. So a main ingredient would be ozone. Every biological, integrative, holistic dental practice has to use ozone because we're dealing with so much biofilm, so much disease in the mouth. Ozone is an important biofilm breaker. And simple question, do you use ozone? Do you use ozone gas? Do you use ozone water? Super important, especially to run ozonated water through the water lines of the practice. Secondly, do you use fluoride? And if the answer is yes, then we know that is not a true.
So it gives you a level of understanding of where they're
at.
Yes,
exactly. How do you diagnose? Do you use a cone beam CT scan?
Say that again.
Do you use a cone beam?
A cone beam. Okay.
CT scan.
Okay.
That's a digital type of CT scan with a lot less radiation,
Okay.
especially for dentistry, that allows us to really diagnose properly, because regular traditional x-rays only diagnose about 52% of the problems. And unfortunately, 90% of dental offices are still just using the little 2D dental x-rays that don't show the big picture.
Okay. And so, I think for many people that are just going for a cleaning, in my opinion, there's probably not a lot of harm that comes from traditional dentistry and cleaning and all that kind of stuff. But when we start getting into surgeries, somebody that needs a crown, somebody that needs root canals, what else would you say in sort of the dentistry world that start to become where the delineation starts to take place between standard practices and more of a true holistic biological dentistry?
Yes, great question. Anybody who has had missing teeth, whether wisdom teeth removed, or let's say for orthodontics, they removed some teeth, like you were mentioning your dentist wanted to do. That's actually common. Anybody who has had missing teeth, or anybody who's had a root canal, or anybody who's had a crown can benefit from a 3D x-ray.
Okay.
Because we're looking at not just, do you have a cavity? We're looking at, okay, the health of the jaws. Do you have microbes inside the jawbone that can cause inflammation? Do you have TMJ issues? Do you have airway issues? Because on a cone beam or a 3-dimensional scan, we can actually see the airway. Sleep is such an important part of dentistry and of health overall. Then the second question would be like, what's the philosophy of the practice? If they don't have one, that's, a problem. Because if they say, oh, we just see cavities and fill them, that's not really.
This is an allopathic approach, right? It's like,
exactly.
We have an issue, we have a complaint. Let's just address that thing in whatever way possible.
Yeah. I always treat the whole, not the whole.
Right.
That's the important part.
Right.
So when, let's say somebody has a lot of cavities, the typical thing to do is to go into a dental office and, okay, you have a bunch of cavities, let's fill them. But in a biological holistic office, we look at, okay, why are those cavities happening? Usually it's a digestive problem. It's a gut issue because they're not absorbing the minerals. It's also an oral microbiome problem because they're having now an increase of the cavity-causing bacteria. And it's also probably a diet problem. They're not eating the right thing. So all these things need to be addressed.
And even breathing, right? Like at night, right? Because that changes. If we're not breathing through the nose at night, then we're breathing through the mouth too often. That changes the oral microbiome of the mouth itself.
You're absolutely right. It does. That's why, mouth taping is important, especially if we find that out. So we need to not just drill and fill. We need to look at the whole person. How can we correct these issues? Because otherwise what's going to happen is they're going to come back in 6 months with more cavities.
Right. We're just putting Band-Aids on things. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't believe in drilling in the teeth when the teeth are the weakest. We want to try to mineralize them first.
Okay.
So how do we do that?
Why is that? Why?
Because then we're taking away more tooth structure than necessary. The tooth is so fragile when the pH in the mouth is very low because of cavity causing bacteria. So we want to change that alkalinity, and that the body can mineralize the teeth back.
Yeah, this is something I think people don't understand. It's again why I had this philosophy of this understanding that the sort of aspects of the teeth can be regrown. Maybe not enamel. I'm not sure about that. I keep hearing no, and I don't know. But I definitely know the level underneath that, the dentin, that can be regrown, and I've done it, and I have pictures of it.
Yes, I love it.
Using this, right? But what's required is mineralization. So we need to be absorbing our food correctly. We need to be eating the right foods. We need to have the oral microbiome balanced or in its best state, right? Because if the pH is off, if there's certain microbes that are growing, this is causing inflammation, it's causing infections. There's all kinds of reasons that breakdown would occur,
Yes.
right? But we have this process of osteoblasts, right? And odontoblasts, right? So this is what happens at the bone level, right? We don't just grow bones when we're young and we keep them. There's this constant building up and breaking down, and this is happening in the teeth, right?
Absolutely.
Which requires hormones, it requires proper signaling, it requires minerals, right?
Minerals, the adequate levels of vitamin D3, all these are super important. You're absolutely right, but a lot of people don't know that, unfortunately. They go in, and then what happens is when the tooth is like in this fragile state, we drill on it. That's the chance that it's going to probably end up with a root canal, and now we end up removing teeth. So super important to address the root cause.
So let's back up. We've kind of talked about it a little bit, but why is the oral, this is a food sensitivity summit, right? So somebody's, got all these food issues that they're dealing with. We know that the gut's playing a role in there, and the immune system, of course. How does the mouth tie in? Because maybe we just kind of skipped over that, but this is really important. From your perspective, why would the mouth be something to consider here with regard to gut issues and immune system issues and all kinds of symptoms?
Yeah, well, the mouth is the opening of the digestive tract. That's where digestion starts. And saliva is an important part of that digestion. So we need to actually chew our food properly. So we need to have good dentition. Because through that process of chewing, we start to digest the food in the mouth. A lot of people don't realize that. And I was guilty of this when I was a resident, because I would swallow my food whole.
This is a big problem. I've had this issue most of my life until I brought awareness to it. But even when I understood how important chewing was, the habit is so strong of just, you don't even think, right? And so it's really just this mindless eating. And when I say mindless, it's like really thinking about and feeling. And in fact, in Ayurveda, I really got a deeper understanding of this. When you take a bite, there's an aspect of awareness that you can bring to this, not only in the amount of chewing, let's say, but what are you tasting? What is the texture? What is the consistency? What is the flavor? Like really being mindful of what's happening while you're eating is a whole thing in Ayurveda that can be practiced, right? And again, but the conditioning is so strong in many of us that I still don't do this to the degree that I'm hoping to. It's like it's still this work in progress.
Yes, I understand. But what's interesting also with the chewing, we have the oral microbiome, right? So as we chew, as part of that oral microbiome, we swallow it. And what we're seeing, actually, part of the oral microbiome can end up, let's say, in the stool. And it can create problem if it's pathogenic. So that's why it's super important to make sure that the mouth stays healthy. We cultivate a good oral microbiome, right? We don't want to sterilize the microbiome.
Right. And so this is what I'm seeing in my practice. And I'd love to see kind of what you feel is, we're looking at gut health. We're running gut health tests of various kinds, right? Stool tests and these type of things. And we're starting to identify imbalances, right? Whether they be, more pathogenic bacteria, less ketone strains. We have maybe some infections and all these things. But it's like that can be sort of originating in the gut, or it could be originating in the mouth. This could be a place where we are constantly seeding dysbiosis in the gut.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And one of the tests I like to run is called an oral DNA test. It's a saliva test for anybody that has gum inflammation, and automatically ask, do you have gut issues? Because we say leaky gums, leaky gut. And almost always there is some kind of pathogen in the mouth from the ones that I'm testing that causes gut inflammation. One of it being Fusobacterium. We know the Fusobacterium type of bacteria that resides in the oral microbiome has been linked to GI inflammation and even tumors.
And this isn't something that shows up on a lot of the gut tests. This is not a bacteria that they test for. Right? Because look, we have thousands of strains of different microbes. And so they can only really test for many. And even then, they're dependent on the research to actually help guide the tests in terms of what's important and what's not. And so we're always discovering new things.
Yes.
So this is probably one of those that if we actually started measuring this and looking at this at the gut level, we could probably find some pretty interesting stuff. But I don't think that the awareness is there to do that, or maybe it's cost prohibitive or whatever the case might be. But this is a perfect example of really understanding that the dysbiosis or lack thereof, right? The actual balance of bacteria at the mouth level, or microbes, I would say beyond bacteria, the microbes there
are really important. And we may not be able to even identify that when we're just looking at the gut.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we do know from a lot of the studies that were done at the VA hospital is anytime gums bleed, bacteria also goes inside the body.
Just directly right there. In
Directly
the mucosa.
right there. How do we know this? They actually looked at people getting a dental cleaning at the VA hospital. So they were collecting blood samples. Within 10 minutes of the cleaning, there was already an increased level of bacteria in the blood coming from the mouth.
So this is going to impact the way the immune system responds, right? This sort of level of threat that the immune system is now perceiving is a consistent source from the gums, from the teeth, from the jaw, directly into the system. Even if we are looking at the gut and running tests and finding some sort of, oh, it's not that bad, we just got some things here, clean. But it's like the source is somewhere else and it's going directly into the system.
Yeah.
And the nervous system, the immune system is going to have to respond to that right then and there. I've had a few clients where they appeared to have some sort of dysbiosis, perhaps fungal infections, et cetera. And eventually when I gained enough awareness around this, I started looking at the mouth or just at least asking them about their dental history. And what I found was those that have had root canals and crowns and all these things, that person was much more likely to have systemic issues start to crop up because of that. And so now, granted, I didn't have the proper tools, and I still don't really, to properly evaluate somebody and say, okay, how bad is this, and what do we notice? But I would send them to a holistic biological dentist to say, hey, look, you got to get this checked out. I don't know if it's an issue, but go get it checked out because you may be harboring an infection at that level. What are you seeing when you have clients that come in with crowns, with past root canals, these type of things?
Yeah. So I really look at three areas of the mouth. One is the oral microbiome that we just talked about
With the
via
test,
saliva
so
test.
DNS, yep.
The second one would be jaw cavitations and root canal silent infections. Why? Because the root canal is a dead tooth. Oftentimes people have no symptoms. However, we find huge infections behind these root canals, or even sometimes when people had wisdom teeth removed in those sites, when microbes from the mouth crawled inside there during the healing time, it can cause bone necrosis and actually a site of chronic inflammation.
So this is what we do with, let's say somebody needs a surgery in their knee, back, arm, whatever. They're very good about sterilizing and making sure that we don't get infections in that surgical wound, but it doesn't seem like we take that level of care when it comes to dentistry.
Not for the mouth.
Yeah.
And it's not the common thing to do. I remember when I was doing my oral surgery rotation in dental school, it was, okay, take the tooth out, bite on a piece of gauze and go home. And there's trillions of bacteria in the mouth, and a lot of them don't need oxygen to survive.
They're anaerobic.
Anaerobic, exactly. Yeah. So they crawl inside the jawbone. They cause osteonecrosis. We know this how because on the IOMT website, there's actually a paper on position paper on cavitations. They looked at the research from like the 1900s, and there's lots of research articles under different name: ischemic osteonecrosis, or even neuralgia-inducing chronic osteonecrosis, because it can cause symptoms, strange symptoms, or neuralgia-like symptoms.
Yeah, this is the thing. Like this is part of the issue with any kind of infection, any stealth infection, is that you got an infection in the mouth. It's not going to just cause problems in the mouth. You're going to have mood issues, sleep issues, nervous system dysregulation, gut issues, hormonal imbalances, detoxification issues, digestion issues. It can show up, chronic pain, right? Like there's so many rashes. I mean, pretty much anything you can name, it can show up. And this can be the difficult part of like, where is this? What is this coming from? Why is my knee pain like this? And I can't get rid of it. And I've been doing so much stuff with the knee. And it's like, well, actually could be an infection in the jaw.
Yes. And every time when I open up a cavitation site, something that looks dark on a CT scan, I biopsy it. And there's a soup of microbes. It's never sterile. It could be from 2 to like 30 different microbes. It could be a virus. It could be parasitic as well.
And fungal. I think you were even mentioning that fungal is a thing.
And fungal, yes. And the third bucket that we look at, it's teeth, speaking of fungal. The teeth, like underneath crowns, especially with root canal treated teeth, we find like black teeth.
That's wild.
And
so you remove the crown.
We remove the crown, and underneath
and
it's all
just
black.
This necrotic, dead, moldy
tooth.
That's crazy.
And those patients also have high mold in their bloodstream.
And they're looking for, is there mold in my house? I didn't find anything. It's in my gut. Okay, I'm treating the gut. And it's like they're chasing sort of the symptoms, the downstream effects.
Exactly. So
potentially.
yeah, yeah. So I think we have to look at the mouth. It's just a difficult place because sometimes we start seeing a black line at the gum line because you have this beautiful porcelain white crown that's covering the problem. But oftentimes around root canal treated teeth, we see recession of the gum. And at that recession area, the tooth is black. So that's a sign for me, usually when I look in the mouth. And any practitioner can look in the mouth and see, okay, do I see any black at the gum line? That's usually a sign that it could be potentially a moldy, dead tooth there.
Yeah, this has been my experience trying to get evaluated at the mouth level. I remember having, I think you call them pockets in the gums, right?
Yes.
And so it's like basically the levels of receding gum, right, and inflammation and these type of things. And I remember getting these scores, and certain teeth had receding gums, and which indicates inflammation. Okay, but why, right?
Yes.
And so and the solution I would always get was, okay, you got to brush and floss. And I'm like, man, I do these things, right? And I use a water pick, and I'm like, I do oil pulling, and I'm like doing these things, but there was deeper reasons. And so this is kind of where I got stuck and had to continue to evolve my learning about what's happening here. But what are some of these other things that when you find them, there's a different level of evaluation or solution than what the standard dentistry world would provide?
Yeah. This brings me to this test that we have from Europe called the oral fitness test, which measures the enzymatic breakdown of the tissues. So it doesn't look at plaque. And what's been interesting for me to see is that people with a lot of plaque sometimes score low, meaning they have very little inflammation. And people with very little plaque, but with a lot of gum recession, can score very high.
And so this enzymatic score is indicating sort of levels of inflammation.
Yes, it's called the metallometalloprotease. Yeah. Okay. So what this does when this level is high of this particular enzyme, it's a collagenase, so it breaks down collagen. When that enzyme is high, it's going to break down the collagen in the gums and the bone.
This is pretty critical. Like that's seems like a really big thing to look at.
It is, but nobody's looking at it. We got this test from Europe, actually, and it's not very popular yet in the United States because a lot of times it's like, okay, we have this test, you have a high score. Most people would say brush and floss, but what I'm noticing is like that's
not going to change the function.
No,
the body is functioning in a certain way. And this is part of the issue, right? Is that especially in the dental world, but it's across medicine, which is that there's this lack of appreciation for the body's intelligence and wisdom, that it's doing things for a reason, that it doesn't really make mistakes, that it's responding to the environment and the inputs to the body itself. And so if there's dysfunction, if there's inflammation, if there's infections, if there's metals, if there's toxicity, if there's habits and things that are not conducive to proper or healthy function, then the body's going to respond accordingly to try to create some level of survival and maintenance of the tissues itself. And so this is and we may not know, but there's a reason that the body's doing this. And so we have to at least appreciate that, right?
Yeah. I always say, there's so many signs in the mouth that we should pay attention to because it's hard to see farther down in the GI tract. We just can't. We have to put a camera, but the mouth is pretty easy.
It's a window, right?
It's a window into one's health. And I think if we see a generalized type of recession, okay, that's a sign of an oral microbiome problem. That's a sign of inflammation. Could be also stress related because, as people clench and grind, that recession could. So we see so many things in the mouth. Cool.
Well, let's talk about those because this is a fun one. So when I think about the mouth, and you can add your expertise here too, but it's if we have crowded teeth, to me that indicates that the mandible and the maxilla, the jaw bones, you could say, the facial structure has not been developed properly or optimal from development. So if we have crowding teeth, it's not a matter of let's remove wisdom teeth. No, those are there for a reason. I would say you're wise if you have them still at this point. But really what we need to do is expand the jaw. And there's ways we can do that. Dr. Felix Liao's work, and there's other ways to sort of manipulate and grow these jaw bones to fit more teeth and to create more room for them. If we see coatings on the tongue, right? So this is from Ayurveda. You stick out the tongue, look for these sometimes they're kind of hairy looking, sometimes they're white, green, black, orange, especially in the morning. Stick out your tongue and look at the coating on the tongue. That indicates we've got dysbiosis, undigested food matter, problems in the gut level that's sort of making its way or showing up in the teeth. We've got receding gums. What does that indicate to you?
To me, receding gums indicates a higher level of inflammation.
Okay.
Because for that breakdown to happen, especially some people have generalized gum recession. They say, oh, I brush really well and I floss really well. Okay. What is your diet like? Do you have high inflammation in your body? And what I'm noticing is like when we're actually working on the general body inflammation, like markers such as like CRP, even the MMPs that I mentioned, via saliva testing, we can actually make a difference in one's overall health.
And then the other one I would say that we can look at in the mouth.
I mean, one of the things I think would be important to look at is also the quality of the enamel. Do we see a lot of breakdown of the enamel? And you look at sometimes the people and their enamel is kind of almost brittle. It's all like jagged and cracked. That could be an indication of like more acidity in the saliva and more of the breakdown of the enamel. Because as you mentioned, if we create the right environment, we can maintain our teeth healthy a lot longer.
And the acidity in the saliva would be indicative of improper diet, dysbiosis in the mouth. Is there anything else?
Exactly. And also in combination with stress and clenching, that for sure will destroy the enamel. But usually it's the improper diet and the pH being too acidic, meaning somebody's eating maybe too many processed foods.
Right. Or the mouth breathing too much, right?
Mouth breathing
especially
too much.
At night, right? Mm-hmm. So you mentioned plaque. This is an interesting one because I've heard many different things along the way, and we were chatting about this before, but I'd love for you to share this idea that plaque in and of itself is not bad or good. We have to evaluate that and figure out what's going on. So maybe you can just kind of fill us in. Because I think this is this is one that most people are going to be like, what?
Exactly, because a lot of the commercials out there, plaque, it's dangerous for you. It's all
every time, even still, I go into the dentist and they see plaque and they're like, got to remove it, got to get that out of here.
Yeah,
and it's like, wait, what, really? Do we?
We want to keep it in balance, and I always say we want to nurture the microbiome. We know there's 10 times more bacterial cells than there's human cells. So we're not going to win that war of using enough antimicrobial mouthwashes to sterilize our mouth. Plus, it's not going to taste well at all. We're going to end up with ulcerations of the gums, of patches on the tongue, because our mouth needs a healthy microbiome. So we have to think about, okay, even tea tree oil, for example, is too strong. It's going to kill the oral microbiome. So I'm not a big fan. Sometimes people think natural is automatically good.
Right.
Not necessarily. So looking at the plaque level, what I'm noticing is like some people even have we notice the plaque, we don't see inflammation, and we don't see cavities. It is important to maintain a healthy level of plaque via brushing. You want to do flossing or water flossing, and eating fermented foods, using chewable probiotics for people that have issues, such as a white-coated tongue, for example. But we want to not wipe it all off, because the harder you brush, you're also damaging the gums. And also in the dental office, we have some hygienists that are so aggressive in scraping to the point where they're scraping away gums and tooth structure. I actually have one case that I posted recently of one of my patients who's in his 70s. 2 of his lower front teeth died from over scraping over the years by the hygienist.
Which is typically where plaque would form, right? Because saliva is there.
Exactly.
And so in other words, plaque is the body's natural response to something, okay?
Yes.
And it typically involves saliva and minerals and these type of things, right? And it's showing up in these cracks and crevices. And of course, in our bottom lower teeth is where a lot of that saliva likes to hang out, especially at night. Yeah. But it's kind of a biofilm, you could say, right? And it's very hard, right? Which biofilms can be, this kind of glycoprotein matrix. And it can either harbor tons of dysbiotic bacteria, which cause inflammation and create problems, or it may not, right? Where it's got a sort of normal bacterial balance, which isn't causing inflammation. It's not really causing us a ton of problems. So I guess the point is do your oral hygiene, clean up the body, fix the gut, all the things that you would do anyway. But we can't just look at the plaque and say, well, that's causing the problem. If I just scrape it out of here, then we're fine and we stay on top of that. No. There's actually something deeper happening. And if it is problematic, which it can be, then we need to fix the real issue.
And the bacteria that's actually problematic, the pathogenic type, doesn't live on the surface where you see the plaque. It likes to live under the gum. So it doesn't matter that the top surface is clean if we're not cleaning the bottom, like the bottom underneath the gums where the, let's say, P. gingivalis, which causes brain inflammation, likes to live. It doesn't live on the surface.
Got it. So what are the oral hygiene sort of techniques that you like to give people? And look, maybe you can just mention all the good things. You may not say, okay, you're going to have to do all of these 15 things, but I'm thinking oil pulling is kind of one of these, pretty safe, right? It's not going to solve all your problems, but it can be a good way to sort of rebalance the microbiome and clean things up. For me, water picks or water floss type of thing. Of course, brushing, right? Maybe you can talk about the proper types of toothpaste or optimal types of toothpaste there. What else? I mean, not using these horrific, what's the Listerine, like these classic things, right?
With a low pH, with lots of alcohol, you know that.
Right.
We just talked about how low pH is bad for cavities now. You know, we can't introduce like low pH mouthwashes.
Acidic,
but you named some good ones, the water flossing, the oil pulling, but the oil pulling must be done correctly. That's the only thing,
Okay. So,
it needs to be done for the whole 20 minutes of time in order to actually have that
So
soap-like
why is that good? Maybe help me clarify this, because there's different sort of myths or ideas about why oil pulling is effective. But the traditional way, and I think it comes from Ayurveda, but it's definitely old, where you're sort of using a reasonably small amount of oil for 20 minutes, swishing it around kind of casually. You're not swishing violently back and forth, but you're kind of doing that and then spitting it out, right? So what is the proper way, and why does it need to be done that way?
So I looked into this because I wanted to see if there's any science behind oil pulling, because I asked to comment on this quite a bit. And initially in Ayurveda, they were using sesame oil because it was readily available. And what's interesting about oil, if we swish it back and forth between the teeth for 20 minutes, it has a soap-like effect. It becomes almost like a soap. I remember also my grandfather used to make soap out of oils.
Yeah.
So that's what kind of mimics that.
And which makes sense, because when I get to that point, 15, 20 minutes, whatever it is, and you spit it out, it's really not an oil at that point.
Yes.
It's this very soapy, there's a saponification, no question.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize that was why, but that makes sense. Okay, cool.
So that's what's cleaning. So I was looking at some studies done at the Indian Dental School. And they showed that it helps with gingivitis, definitely decreases, especially people that have gum inflammation. But it only gets underneath the gum about 1 millimeter when you're doing 1 millimeter or 2 millimeters, not that deep. Some of the, when we measure the gum pockets, we read 3s or 4s. So I still believe it's necessary to do water flossing. A water flosser can actually get that pulsation of the water jet can get up to 6 millimeters under the gum.
I mean, some of those are pretty intense. Like I remember starting that, and I had to actually start a little like lower dose, you could say, like not as high pressure.
Yes.
Because it's pretty intense. It was a very interesting thing, but I grew to love it. And especially for somebody like me that had crowded teeth, flossing was always like a challenge in a way, because, some of them would go in pretty easily, and then I'd have to really get it in there for some, and then I'd get down in there and just rip the gums apart. And I'm like, oh my God, this can't be what flossing is. Eventually, when I gained some more space using Dr. Felix Liao's sort of work, then I start getting gaps in my teeth, and I'm like, I can just slide it in, and it's so much easier, right? But I still prefer the water pick. It seems to be more effective. And I think there's some research that shows that it's actually a better way to improve the sort of microbiome of those tissues.
We have really good research. I love the water flosser. And the more I started looking into the research of it from all kinds of universities, independent research, we know that it increases the health of the tissues, because it also does, that pulsation. It works out the collagen fibers, almost like gum fitness, I like to call it.
It's a little massage almost.
It's a little massage, and it tightens the gum tissues around the teeth, and those act as a protective barrier from microbes to crawl underneath the gum tissue.
Interesting.
And also, when we're using the water flosser, you mentioned it could be pretty strong. I always recommend starting at the lower power, but all the studies were done at the medium power. So we don't need to go to the highest, but if you love it at the highest,
to each
no
their
problem.
own, right? Yeah. Just don't start there. Don't start there. I usually start at the higher end, and then I need to learn to start slow. So I learned that the hard way again.
Yeah, but all studies show that it's actually more effective in controlling bleeding. Because what happens when gums bleed? There's an opportunity for bacteria that's living in the mouth to crawl and catch a ride in the blood vessels and end up somewhere else in the body. So we don't want that. We want to keep the gums from not bleeding at all. That's ideal.
When somebody comes to you with, let's say, root canals that they've done in the past, right? Or some of these crowns, what's the what are the issues that you see that crop up? We mentioned some infections. How do we clean that up? How do you address it, right? Because I think a lot of people like myself and probably everybody my age or older has probably gotten some level of dental care that was not done properly or not done optimally. And eventually it leads to issues later that they have to correct. So what are some of these things that you end up seeing in your clinic, and how do you address them properly in case there are people that have had root canals 15 years ago and they're starting to really go downhill, their crowns are getting old. And instead of just repeating that process, what do you do instead?
I have to start with telling my own story about root canals because at the age of 14, I had a root canal. And at the time I was living in Romania. Poor dentistry at the time, it was still communist. So I came to the United States, I went to dental school. And while I was in dental school, one of the residents looked at my tooth and it's like, oh, your root canal, it wasn't done properly. I need to redo it so I could seal it better.
And real quick, do you believe that at that point, that was the right call to get that root canal? Or
no.
Now, knowing what you know now, there probably could have been a different solution.
Yes.
Okay.
Would have been a different solution.
Yeah.
But, as I grew up, I loved sugar. I was a total sugar addict. So
who doesn't, right?
I ended up with a bunch of cavities.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the right training in how to clean my teeth. I never even knew what flossing your teeth was until I went to dental school, how to floss and clean properly. And this root canal, I noticed, especially when I was in dental school, that I started to kind of turn a little bit dark. And a few years later, my colleague said, oh, there's nothing wrong with your tooth. We took a regular x-ray. And at the time I was, just following traditional dentistry. I didn't know anything about biological. And after I graduated, I started taking some classes on biological dentistry, and I kept looking at my tooth. I was having digestive issues. Interestingly enough, this tooth was on the meridian of digestion for me.
We'll get into that in a little bit too. So I'll just as a reminder, I want to touch into that. So
But then every time I would floss, I would get a smell around the tooth. And I'm like, oh, but my colleagues were like, your tooth is fine. So I finally followed my intuition. I said, I need to get this tooth out. So I had my tooth removed. The whole thing was like dark brown. I was happy to get rid of it.
I can imagine seeing that and you're just like, oh my God.
And just like I felt so much better.
Yeah.
And I was developing, occasionally I would have heart palpitations, but I never associated it to the root canal tooth.
Why would you? Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So my heart palpitations went away. So I started paying attention and how I felt. My digestion improved. And I was like, oh my God. So I had to live it for myself in order to be able to guide other people.
It's the lessons we have to learn as humans I get it.
Yeah.
And so you got the tooth removed. Is there what then? Like how, you just take it out, but what's the solution and what's the proper way to address a defunct, faulty, poor root canal job? How does somebody stabilize after that?
Yeah. Super important to take it out properly.
Okay.
And of
so
course,
it should be taken out.
Absolutely.
Okay.
In my opinion, for me, I would never get another root canal in my mouth. As a matter of fact, I had another tooth that died from just a regular filling, and I said, no.
Okay,
I'm
so
gonna take it out.
Removed, and it must be removed properly. What does that kind of look like?
Yeah. So once a tooth is dead, there could be a lot of microbes around the tooth, and sometimes even microbes that are leaching into the bone. So as the tooth is removed, it's super important to clean out any kind of that necrotic or dead tissue that can form around the tooth.
And I want to comment on this because we see this. I believe this is happening everywhere in the body because this is how nature works. When things are dying, when there's no life force energy left, this is the microbe's job. This is what parasites, microbes, viruses, fungi, this is what they do. They're nature's recyclers, right? So nature abhors this sort of stagnation, this dead stuff. And so life feeds on death to rebirth, right? Like this is kind of the cycle, right? So if we have necrotic stuff within us, we have two options. We can allow the bacteria and the fungi and the microbes to do their work.
It might take a while.
which and cause us problems because they have sort of things that they produce as a result, or we can clean that up and then the environment's not suitable for these opportunistic microbes that are there to recycle the dead tissue.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, you put that so well. Because what's happening in the dental community, go to an endodontist, get a root canal, and let's close our eyes and hope for the best. but
Right.
nature has its ways, like you
Right.
mentioned.
So we cut that out properly. We get rid of the necrotic tissue. Then what happens from there?
Then I like to see healthy bleeding bone. Okay,
Okay.
super, super important because blood brings back good bone. I am not a fan of bone grafts at all, even though I finished my residency in periodontics and where we were taught do a bone graft. What is a bone graft? It's something from a cadaver or cow, or it could be a pig that is ground up and put into place to kind of fill in the hole. There's a few problems with this. Some people can trigger an autoimmune issue.
Yeah.
That's the
So it's
problem.
foreign
with them.
tissue, right?
It's
Yeah.
foreign tissue. So
Right.
I don't do that anymore. I clean it up. I use ozone in the form of gas and water to make sure it's as sterile as possible. And then I draw blood and use something called platelet-rich fibrin, or PRF, where is basically that's growth factors from somebody's blood. Where we spin it down in a centrifuge, we collect just the clot. That's kind of a whitish yellow clot full of growth factors and immune cells that I put back into that hole to prevent microbes from the mouth crawling back in.
Beautiful. So this is, I love this philosophy because for me, what I've come to perceive is that there's elements of the body that can be repaired, that can be healed. We can heal. And sometimes we need to actually cause injury to heal. You see this a lot in facial regenerative medicine and, the microneedling and all these things. We're actually causing injury so that the body can respond with healing factors. So that's one element. There's another element where if something's dead, if something is actually, not only is that not functional, but it can actually be causing dysfunction. And when we remove it, when we actually, whether it's a growth, whether it's even cancers and these type of things, we get rid of it. Now the body can actually repair properly because this thing was sort of blocking or creating sort of systemic issues. So we get rid of it. But then the other aspect is that after we do that, the body can now heal and it can repair properly, right? And whether it's skin or whether it's bone or what have you, there are still natural intelligence and wisdoms of healing and regrowth that can now be induced because that thing is out of the way, right? It's sort of like cleaning up the trash out of your home. Now the home can actually be sort of healthy. We can clean up the rest. We got to get the trash out first and then we can clean it up, right? So what about, I'm curious where we're going in sort of regenerative medicine world, right? So this is what's so exciting for me in sort of the longevity, anti-aging kind of space, is that we have these really cool regenerative technologies, whether it's stem cells or PRP or, all kinds of things that are coming about. What kinds of things are happening in the dentistry world? Are there things happening? Because I feel like that's still a really, really powerful avenue that is to be sort of laid, whether it's using light, oxygens or various gases. I think even sound will be used if it's not already infrasound. Like there's all kind of opportunities. What are we seeing in the dental world?
Yeah. Definitely we're seeing a move towards more biologically. How do we stimulate the signal? The same thing like we're seeing in medicine. Interestingly, there's pulpal stem cells right inside every tooth. We have stem cells. We're learning how to harvest those and what can we use them for? Can we regrow teeth potentially? The biggest problem we're having is like how to regrow the right tooth in the right place.
But
right?
I mean, like if we really get back down to it, right? Like the body grew from, zygote, right? So there's some developmental programs. Now, some of them, I think die off and, we don't maintain this ability to regrow limbs, right? For example, but I think there's something there, right? Like we have to, I think at least start with the premise that potentially there's something that can be regrown. And we have this idea, I think, conditioned within us that we can't regrow teeth. Like that's ridiculous. But I have evidence that we can to some degree. So at what level can we do that? So that's really exciting, actually.
It is.
That we're actually looking into that because I think the possibility really is profound. Because even in the stem cell world, we're seeing stem cells combined with UV and red light, and we're using light as a way to propagate growth. And so there's a lot there.
Yeah, absolutely. I use a lot of lasers, speaking of light in dentistry, to stimulate different biological processes from, gum growth, from also cutting teeth, but also TMJ regeneration. It's super important, bone regeneration via laser technology. So we're actually using what is natively there, just amplified.
Yeah, and this is as we get older, right? I think I'm always kind of thinking about how can I preserve what I've got, right? And stem cell stuff, lasers, these are now becoming a real option for us instead of just cutting, removing, and sort of contributing to this idea of degeneration, we can actually focus on regeneration.
Yeah. Even when it comes to gum health, let's say people that have a lot of gum recession, one of the things I've been using is actually injecting PRF or platelet-rich fibrin into the gum tissue to help stimulate that, resilient gum tissue, especially for people that have lost it. Another methodology is actually harvesting some fibroblasts or cells from the actual gum, grow them on a petri dish. There's actually a company that does that, and then send them back to us from the same person to actually graft it into place.
Beautiful. So just to kind of wrap this up, tell me if you'd add anything to this, but we can have systemic health issues that can cause dental issues. Systemic infections, metals, nervous system dysregulation, poor sleep, chronic stress, et cetera, that will contribute or propagate dental issues. We can have dental issues that will create systemic issues, right? And so we can't just look at one area and think that that's the only thing. We got to look at the whole,
Yes.
holistic, right? But again, I think maybe one of the factors here is sometimes we don't realize that the body, other issues can, peripheral issues can create dental issues and vice versa. And if we don't look at the whole thing, then we could be missing a piece and be chasing our tail in the mouth, really the issues in habits or the gut or other places in the body and vice versa. We could have issues all around our body, keep chasing those issues. But if we're not looking at the mouth, then we could be missing a huge piece.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And especially today when we have so many personalized tests that we can do that are simple. Hey, do you have inflammation? Do you have galvanic current in the mouth? Do you have, toxicity? It's easier for dentists and even for health care practitioners to start to do some mouth testing in their office.
One thing I want to cover before we wrap here is the silver amalgams that people might still have. What should people look for in terms of a process to get rid of those? Because there's there's dentists out there that'll do it.
Yeah.
But there's a way to do it properly. What would you look for, and how do you guys do it?
Another struggle I actually had 16 large mercury fillings in my mouth removed improperly.
Oh.
I was so sick and toxic and I didn't know what was wrong with me. So I'm super passionate. That's what started me on the whole path of holistic dentistry.
Because it was kind of maybe drilled and there was sort of fragments that ended up going through the gut, but then also the fumes and the vapors.
Exactly. The fumes are actually more dangerous.
Especially to the brain, I think, right?
Absolutely. It's a neurotoxin. Yeah. So they like to lodge and, the body's smart. It doesn't want a neurotoxin circulating in the bloodstream. So it's going to store it in fatty tissues like the brain. So it took me a couple years to actually fully detox. I don't even know if I'm fully detoxified, but at least to get myself to a level.
Get back, yeah.
Yeah. So IAOMT has a great technique called the SMART for safe mercury amalgam removal technique that any dentist can go and actually get certified. And, it's beneficial not just for the patient, but for the entire dental team. There's a lot of dentists that are toxic out there and they're breathing the fumes. They have headaches. They start to have tremors and Parkinson's and they don't know why. Mm-hmm. But we're breathing all this toxicity in dentistry. So
I remember a couple of things. I remember having sort of a negative pressure. In other words, sucking the air out of the room at a high rate, right? So ventilation, you could say, high level of ventilation to get rid of some of those. I mean, they're like fully suited and booted, like they're in a toxic environment. I mean, all this gear on to protect themselves. I remember one of them is kind of to crack in other words, not to drill it and create a bunch of, but you want to crack it into big pieces and get rid of it quickly. In other words, time is of the essence, clearing the room of the toxic air, and being sort of, you could say surgical, but strategic about how you're breaking that and getting that out. Yeah. And then in my view, there's a way to sort of, to do a preconditioning. In other words, you start to detoxify, a pre-tox, you could say, knowing that you're going to get exposed. Like there's some level of exposure. How do we minimize that? Well, you can kind of take some binders and do some things ahead of time. And then post-op, you'd want to take some of these sort of detox measures as well, right? So there's it's like a whole thing. When I did it, I just went in there and I don't even remember what they did. They just kind of just did it. And so I didn't have this awareness of how to even think about that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's a toxic environment and we have to use the big suction, the big vacuum, the regular suction. We put a little dam that surrounds the tooth and isolates to prevent people from actually swallowing the mercury particles.
Yeah. And so I think for me, the big thing is like, does the dentist really understand how toxic this stuff is. And if they do, they're going to take a bunch of measures. If not, they're just going to kind of go about it in a fairly loose way. And that's what you want to avoid, right?
Yes, we want to avoid that. And we want to make a healthier world, not just for, the people out there, but for the dental offices.
100%. Yeah. Dr. Sanda Moldovan, this has been so good. Thank you so much for joining me today. Tell people where they can maybe find you if they're in the area.
Thank you so much, Jason. It's been such a pleasure to be here and chat with you. You can find me on Instagram at Dr. Sanda, or you can listen to my Holistic Dentistry Show podcast, where I have all kinds of topics about oral health and how you can better your body.
Beautiful. And do you have a product line as well, I think, or no?
Yes, I'm super passionate about nurturing the oral microbiome. So I started a brand called Orasana. 3 steps to nurture the microbiome and create resilient teeth and gums at orasana.com.
Beautiful. That's wonderful. I think this is the more resources we can provide, because people are always looking for, how do I actually take the steps to improve this? So again, Dr. Sanda, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Jason.
Before we dive into the next interview, if you haven't already, please do us a favor and share this event with your friends and family and on social media, so that these breakthrough strategies and innovative healing modalities can reach as many people as possible. You just never know whose life you might change by sharing this cutting-edge health information. Dr. Keisha Ewers, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here.
I love interviewing you. You are a chameleon. You are, I struggle for words to describe how you fit into this world of healing, but you've been a doctor of sexology, or you've done sort of end of life hospice care. You've done integrative functional medicine, Dzogchen, Ayurveda. I'm probably missing about 7 or 8 other things. You've trained in so many areas of health. And I think, like me, it comes from curiosity and this desire to just understand more so that you can be of service in a very complete way. But you have this way of synthesizing all this information, not being dogmatic in any one approach, but really showing up for your clients or your patients in a way that is in their best interests. And I think in order to do that, you really do need a diverse background and understanding, because it's so easy to when you're a hammer, to see everything as a nail. And I understand it, and there's a lot of great clinicians that are great hammers.
Yeah.
But I've run into cases and clients and people, and in my own life, that require a wide array of tools to get the job done. Maybe speak to me about that from your perspective of kind of your journey.
Well, there are 8.5 billion humans on the planet, and we all have different fingerprints. So there's just never a one size fits all.
Yeah.
There are no nails. We're all very different templates. And so I think learning different paradigms of healing has been very important for me because of that recognition. There's just never going to be, we don't treat the disease as Ayurveda says, we treat the person, and every person is different. So there's no diet for the disease. There's no protocol for the disease. It's for the person. And so then really being able to read the person and understand what they need is, I think, an important skill.
And of course, they change through time.
They
right?
do.
So that one person.
I've definitely changed through time.
And as a practitioner, right?
Yeah.
So that I think that's one of the pieces where Ayurveda really kind of really integrated that in me, is that there's a timing to everything, seasons and cycles. And so even the one individual, you cannot view the same today as you did last year.
You can't. I mean, one of the things Ayurveda said, well, we should probably define Ayurvedic medicine, right?
Yeah.
10,000-year-old sister science of yoga came out of India. And one of the things that they said is when you change your clothes with the seasons, you're supposed to change your food, you're supposed to change your activity, you're supposed to change what your routines are and go with that, right? And then there's a cyclical nature to the lifespan also. And we're going to be different constitutions as we move through life. So I think that recognition is very important. And another thing that they said all those years ago that I think is very helpful to bring to our paradigm and our culture is that, and that goes with what we're talking about here, is the body is the canvas of the mind. And so whatever's happening up here is going to be written into the body. And then is that indelible ink?
Right.
Or is it erasable? Can it be changed? Can you paint over your canvas? Absolutely. And so there's where I think it's very important. So you asked me about my story. I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis when I was 30. And before that, I was an ICU nurse, kind of a high adrenaline junkie, skydiving, perfectionist, people pleaser.
And rheumatoid arthritis, for those who aren't familiar, is an
Autoimmune condition.
very related to food sensitivities, loss of
Very
immune
much so.
tolerance. Yep.
Yes, very much so. And, I'd been on multiple antibiotics as a child. I'd been raised in the Navy near jet fuel, and there are a lot of root causes, but I also had a grandfather with rheumatoid arthritis. So it was in my genetics. And at 30, I was training for a marathon. I had 4 children. I was trying to be the most perfect parent, perfect wife,
Superwoman.
perfect, everything that I touched.
Yeah.
And one morning, and this is what my patients will say too, all of a sudden I was sick, but that's not how it works. And I woke up with just 10 pounds of puffiness and redness all over my joints. And it was like someone had taken the batteries out of the Energizer Bunny, and I was flattened and in pain, and got in to see a physician. And when she found out that I had autoimmunity in my family history, she just wrote out 2 prescriptions for me and gave them to me. And, said,
That's
come
your destiny.
back
Yeah.
when you are worse, not if.
Right.
And I was like, wait. And, I said, I eat really well. I'm very disciplined. I exercise. Is there something else I can do besides these methotrexate and nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs? And, that's what's being prescribed today for this. And she said, no, I'm afraid it's genetic, my dear. It was just like, close the book, put it on the shelf, and that's the end of the story. So on my way home, I remember thinking, in my paradigm of Western medicine that I've been born and raised into, is the only thing I know. There's another way out there. And that was the first beginning of cracking open windows and doors to look.
So talk to me about that, because there seems to be a point of readiness, a point of
willingness.
Yeah, it's like you have to make that choice.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have the answer, you don't know where to turn. Yeah. You may there's a big part of disbelief that still may be there, right?
Yep.
But there has to be some spark
Yep.
of sort of divinity that really initiates this. So what was that for you?
Yeah. Recognizing that the word autoimmune meant I'm killing myself, and then going to the next step in my mental thought process of, that means I'm committing suicide in a societally acceptable way. That was a very big turning point for me. Now, why am I killing myself?
It's like this unconscious,
Yeah.
slow suicide.
I'm doing this to myself.
Right.
I've activated, and in those days, I'm 60, so this was 30 years ago, there was not a Starbucks and a yoga studio on every corner. And we didn't know about genetics the way we do today. Nowadays, we can point to things and say, well, yes, this, and this. But in those days, I remember thinking, oh, is there something that activated my genetic destiny, so to speak, that my grandfather had? Because he died in his 50s in a wheelchair with RA. And so I remember thinking, is it set in stone? And we didn't know back then if it was or not. The assumption was yes. My doctor said that as she left the room, right? Like, this is genetic. So I remember, cracking open that door with curiosity. Could that be untrue? And I think that what you're pointing at is very important. Going against what you've been told, going against, just not fighting it, but just being curious about it, opening up a field where maybe some different information can drop in. I think in the Bible, Christ said something about, the jars, if it's full of wine. There's a Buddhist saying about this too. If it's already full, then nothing new can go in. Right. If there's a crack and everything that goes in runs out, then that's also a problem, right? So being able to have the willingness to hold something and bring in new information, that's systems theory.
Yeah.
Right?
And part of it is you got to empty your cup of all the nonsense.
Exactly.
And which, look, as children, we take on so much nonsense, right? From our parents, from our teachers, from society as a whole, perhaps other sources. But the point is that I would say most of it we don't consciously take on. And it's only as we're developing into our adulthood that we have the choice to consciously let go of stuff.
Right.
So that we can bring in something new as adults that really is a choice, right?
Right.
And I think a lot of people who are listening and watching to this are probably at that point where they're really, they have some level of discernment and they're filtering through some of the stuff, which isn't easy. You know, which stuff do I throw away? And which stuff do
Exactly.
I keep? And in my experience, it's rarely a black and white.
Yes.
It's like, oh, I got to take part of this thing
That's right.
and throw away this other part. Hold on to this, which may be thrown out later. Like
Yeah.
there's just kind of this working through.
Well, you and I both know this is a developmental stage
Yeah.
thing. So if we're still in child space, it's going to be very black and white.
Right.
And there's not going to be a willingness to open and throw away anything.
Good
It's
point.
like, this is right, this is wrong.
Right.
You dropped a word in where you said tolerance. You know, food sensitivities are
Very much about tolerance, right?
very much about tolerance. And so it's the question of, am I tolerant to new information? Am I able to, food sensitivities are also about communication. People will say, oh, it's your immune system overreacting.
Mhm.
That's not actually true. It's over communicating, and it's communicating in a different way than is healthy.
Okay, so you're speaking about things in a very integrated way and a conceptual way,
Mhm.
and it's manifesting physically, right? So we're talking about tolerance. We have to have some
Yes.
amount of tolerance, not too much, not too little.
Yes.
We have to have some amount of discernment, not too much, not well. I don't know if you can have too much discernment, but that has to be in alignment.
We could change discernment to discipline.
Sure, there we go.
Because if you're
Not
over
too rigid,
disciplined, you're going
right.
to be rigid.
Right.
And if you're not disciplined enough, then you're going to be loosey goosey. And
Right.
neither one of those will work.
So we have to have some boundaries, but not too much, right?
Yeah.
So maybe just speak to me about. I just want to make sure the audience is with us because
Yeah.
what you're talking about is this energetic quality, you could say, or framework that is impacting the mind, the emotions, the beliefs,
Mhm.
and the body.
Well, I'll circle back around to what I quoted from Ayurveda, which said the body is the canvas of the mind. So if the mind is intolerant, this is interesting, right? It could sound conceptual and woo-woo, but it's actually very, very on point. We can look around and say, what are we intolerant to? Are we intolerant to the government? Are we intolerant to our spouse, to our children, to our parents?
That's
Right?
a big one. That's a big one
Yeah.
for pretty much everyone I know.
Exactly.
Go through that.
Yes. And that's going to
Or
translate.
can I say even to myself?
Well, that's where I'm going.
My being. Okay.
It's going to translate to myself. So when I said to myself, why am I killing myself? It was a lack of tolerance. If I'm not perfect, the perfect mother, the perfect wife, if I'm not succeeding in the levels and the bars that I set myself to, then I'm intolerant to me, which manifests as an autoimmune disease.
So how would one identify if they are tolerant to themselves, right? Because I
Mhm.
think this may be a deeper question, may take a process to unravel.
I've got an easy way.
Okay.
4 Ps.
Okay, cool.
If you find you're a people pleaser, you're intolerant to yourself. Yep. That means
I've gone through that.
someone
Still
else's
unraveling.
needs are more important than mine,
Yeah.
and I'll care for everyone else, and maybe someone will notice me and take care of me.
Mhm.
That is a formula that does not work.
I was a first child.
Same here.
I needed to,
Yep.
yeah,
Same here. First child, people pleaser like crazy.
Yeah.
Right.
be a
So
good boy, be a
that's
good
the
boy,
first
good
one.
girl.
Second one is perfectionism.
I've also fit that bill.
Yep.
To a T.
To a T.
Yeah.
To a P.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those are 2 of our Ps.
Yeah.
And I find that this is the kind of person that shows up in my office with autoimmunity.
Mm-hmm.
People pleasing,
Perfectionism.
perfectionism, the Pitta dosha. So we've been talking
Okay.
about Ayurveda. So lots of fire.
And so we had an Ayurvedic discussion as well. That's a part of the summit. So go listen to that if
Great.
you
Go
haven't.
listen to it.
It's
Yes.
good. But expand because we didn't really go deep on the doshas.
Fire.
Okay.
So this is the one
Just the
that
qualities of fire.
you and I have similar coloring.
Mhm.
So there's some freckles, there's ruddiness underneath the skin, there's light hair, there's light skin, burns easily, has a very sharp mind, a quick tongue, is highly intelligent, and that
Competitive.
Yes, competitive. That sharpness can be turned against oneself. Right. So that's
So that sharpness, that fire, that ability to kind
you're
of
literally
burn things
burning
down,
yourself up.
burn things down,
That's right.
transmute them. Like there's good qualities when they're in alignment
Totally.
and they can get
This is your digestive
Yeah.
fire. It's so important. In Ayurveda, it's called tejas. It's So important. When you have autoimmunity and food sensitivities, what's going on is your tejas fire is burning up your ojas, which is your life force. It's too high. You've gone from a digestive fire that in Chinese medicine is called dantian, right? This little pilot right here that you can bring up or down at will has gone into a prairie fire or a forest fire, and it's just burning everything in its path. So that's pitta.
Right.
Okay. And in my case, it was burning my joints.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the fourth one is going to be holding on to the poison of past pain. So trauma.
A little triple P there. That's
yeah.
that's a good one.
Just throw all those P's in
The
there.
poison of past pain. So you're holding on to that.
Yeah. And so the patterns from that, right? That child that made really smart, very wise decisions,
Necessary. Yeah.
very necessary decisions in the face of, I always say trauma is an event in life that you did not yet have the skill set to navigate. That
You're working with what you got.
you're working with what you got. Yeah. So a lot of times people will think about trauma as sexual abuse, neglect, the adverse childhood experiences study, capital T traumas, and people
Parents'
will
divorces and
separate them out that
right?
way, right? So a parent dies or is addicted to drugs or alcohol, incarcerated, is gone. Those kinds of things are capital T traumas, sure. However, every child goes through trauma because we go through events in life that we haven't yet gotten the skills to navigate. Right. Okay. So those are those 4 P's. That's how we can look at our tolerance
Let's
scale.
review them once again, just so we have them.
People pleasing.
Yep.
Perfectionism, pitta dosha, and holding on to the poison of past pain and the patterns that came from that.
Right. Yeah. And the patterns are interesting because, again, my sort of foray into the world of sort of trauma, I had this understanding of those sort of capital T traumas, and then I kind of incorporated some, let's say, lowercase t traumas. And then I think the final piece for me was this conditioning.
Yeah.
Because I think, yes, everyone experiences trauma. I love your definition. I completely agree. We can't process if we don't have the skills to do so. We're developing, our brains aren't developed, our experiences aren't developed, our mind isn't developed. But there's this conditioning piece where we are all definitely conditioned. Even today as adults, we are constantly competing with conditioning.
Well, something's developing.
Yes.
Our ego.
Yes. That's true too.
Which is our protective mechanism to protect our fragile little psyche, right? That innocence.
Yeah.
So we're developing our ego and those patterns, that conditioning, the beliefs you've alluded to.
The beliefs are big.
All of that happens there.
And we just don't even really know often what these beliefs are, where they're coming from, this conditioning, these mindsets, this understanding. It took me into my 30s, well into my 30s, to understand that I even carried some of this stuff, let alone how to process it.
Which is totally normal.
Right.
That's the developmental stage when we start going, oh, wait a second.
Is this mine?
Wait.
What is this?
You mean the way that I behave is not the way everybody behaves?
It's not conscious?
Wait. If everybody were just more like me, the world would be a better place.
So much easier.
Yeah. It would just be so much better.
Right. Yes.
In the 30s, we start going, wait, maybe that's not true.
And I want to, maybe this is a good time to layer in this piece of accepting our responsibility for all the things that we've carried without minimizing the beating ourselves up, because I have this pattern in spades, and it's something that I've had to consciously recognize that A, I still do it. B, that recognition of it still there actually eases it and can start to unwind that pattern itself.
Yeah. I'm going to say something that might be, what do they call it these days? Trigger warning?
Trigger warning.
I'm going to say something that could be a trigger warning, or it could be a triggering. So trauma, hurt, and betrayal are normal. They're just normal.
They're common and they're normal.
They are normal, and they're going to happen to every single person. When we put in words like deserve and should, we get into trouble. Absolutely no one deserves it. And it should not happen to children that they're hurt. Those two things are fundamentally and profoundly true, and also not in alignment with life.
It's not the reality.
It's not the reality.
Yeah.
And so in our 30s, 20s, 30s, there's a place where we start looking backwards and saying, oh, that shouldn't have happened to me. And there can be some anger and some resentment.
Which is also normal.
Which is
right?
also very, very, very normal. And we can be, like, oh, I'm going to reclaim my power. I'm going to speak my truth, right? These are all really important parts.
It's like this fighting back.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because if you're a roly-poly bug in the corner, right?
It's like somebody gets out of the victim mode a little bit,
Yes.
and they start
Yes.
getting into this like, I'm going to take vengeance on life
Yes.
itself. Right?
Yes. Fire is much easier to work with than clay.
Right.
Right? Being stuck, being underwater, drowning in it, all of those things are inactive.
Right.
So fire is a catalyst. It's an active.
This is one of the strengths of Pitta.
Yes.
It's like, oh, we got some life force here.
Exactly.
It may be burning things down
Yeah.
at this point, but at least there's something there.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there has to be a moment of awakening of, oh, I'm burning myself down.
Mm-hmm.
And, oh, my truth is not necessarily everybody else's truth in this tapestry. And, oh, the expectations I have of life have not been agreed upon by everybody participating.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my expectations are my expectations, and it's up to me to meet them. Now there can be a turning inward, a turning toward, and becoming tolerant of self. I've seen so many people that are so angry with their little one, their little inner child parts, for not doing X, Y, or Z. How come you weren't this or that or that? That's abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And I really want people to hear that. This is a form of abuse. To take a more advanced developmental level of you and turn back to a lesser developed state and judge them.
Yeah. And see, I had this and it didn't really manifest for me as this like angry one, like, how dare you? Like, I can't believe you. It was more like, I should have.
Yeah.
I should have known.
Why
I should have.
didn't you?
Like, in other words,
How
I have
come?
an adult capacity that is online as well, which is very skilled, which is very, can understand, has the capacity to figure things out very well.
Mm-hmm.
But the younger version didn't. And so there's this, it's more of a judgment. Like, I can't believe you didn't see that. Like, what's wrong with you?
Okay,
But
so
it wasn't
that's
aggressive.
the intolerance
Yeah.
to self that you're asking me to lay out. You just did it.
Yeah.
That's it. Intolerant to all your younger versions, all the people that were the players in your life up to the point that you're at right this second.
Because we have those expectations on our parents, right? And I think now
Of
that
everything.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking parents in particular because
Yeah.
as an adult with a little one, my mom in particular, I mean, my parents were young. They were like in their early 20s. And I'm like, oh my God.
Mine
I
were
now
18
see.
when they had me. I just go, oh my gosh.
And they didn't, I mean, for all the complaints I might have about social media and the internet, they didn't have that as a resource. They had their local resources, which were also limited because of where they came from.
Right.
And so it's like, I can't even imagine the lack of resource and development at 20 that my parents had to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And so my expectations as a 7-year-old and 12-year-old and 18-year-old of like how I saw them as basically this surrogate of God, like so, omnipotent in a way as a child.
Well, they set themselves up that way.
Totally.
Yeah.
You're right. They are the authority, right?
We are the authority.
And so there's this belief, right? And so I had
Yeah.
to dismantle that in myself and actually come to a sense of tolerance, compassion, understanding for them, which allowed for this then compassion and understanding and tolerance towards myself,
Exactly.
which was a very difficult. I would say it wasn't difficult. It was just a process.
It's a process.
It's a process.
It is not, I always tell people, it's not a light switch.
Yeah.
This willingness, again, another Ayurvedic term, to digest your emotions, your experiences. That was brand new to me because one of the things Ayurveda says is autoimmune disease is undigested anger. I remember sitting there close on the heels of, why am I killing myself? Saying, but I'm not an angry person. I'm a people pleaser.
Right.
I strap on running shoes and I go running for long miles if I ever get irritated and annoyed and angry. Oh, I'm just blowing off cortisol. I'm not actually processing. I'm not digesting. I'm not coming to the wisdom, just like an apple. You can paint the apple. You can juggle the apple. You can talk about the apple. You can become an expert at apple. You will not get the nutrients from apple unless you take a bite out of it, chew it, and send it through the gauntlet. And then get rid of the parts of apple you don't need anymore in the toilet.
There is waste.
As waste.
Yeah.
Our stories, our memories, our experiences have to be treated in the exact same way. We can't talk about them. We can't become an expert at them. We can't paint them. We actually have to bite them, digest them, and expel the waste and keep the wisdom. It's the only way. It's why betrayal, trauma, and hurt are normal parts of human life. It's the only way we get to wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
We can't be wise elders. We can just be tall children if we don't do this work. And there are a bunch of tall children
There's
running
some
around
really
out
tall
there.
people. Yeah.
Really
yeah.
tall children out
Yeah.
there that are in their elder years, but they're not wise because they haven't done this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is really, really important. And this is the tolerance thing, right? These tall children that haven't done this processing are still intolerant to their past, to themselves, to all of the parts of life that they're unhappy with that are not meeting their expectations. Then we wind up with an immaturity level that's not hard to find when we look out. And just make sure you use that as a mirror and say, okay, that's me too.
Yeah.
How do I do that? Let's get skillful.
That's one of the reasons I love Ayurveda is because it's this conceptual framework that doesn't, like in Western medicine, we connect, the mind and the body and the emotions, and they're connected. And with Ayurveda, it's like, no, they're all kind of one.
Yeah.
They're all interlinked and you can't separate them.
Right.
And when one aspect of your being, it's going to impact all of them, not because they're linked, but because they are one. It's a whole. So this idea of digestion is, if it's faulty, if it's not very good, it's going to affect your emotions, your mental processes, your finances. Like you're not digesting things in every area of your life, perhaps. And so when digestion is weak in the body, and we can identify that through a gut test, perhaps, or through just symptomology and whatnot.
I mean, look at your tongue.
Well, right, exactly.
No, I mean,
it's right there every
look
morning.
Look at your tongue.
Right, every morning. And so therefore, I can do digestive work at the body level, and that will improve my ability to digest at the mental level, at the emotional level, and vice versa.
Vice versa.
So in other words, we can focus,
and it has to be done
right
simultaneously.
And
like
that's the cool thing is
Yeah.
that, okay, we can just say, maldigestion is a thing for me.
Yeah.
Therefore, I have all these opportunities to improve digestion across the board, and they will all impact one another.
Yeah. I can't be drinking ginger tea and reading the newspaper. I know that's old and people probably don't read newspapers anymore.
Watching TikTok
and complaining about what's going on in the world and think the ginger tea is somehow going to help you
Fix everything.
digest. It
Right.
just doesn't work that way.
Right.
Instead,
In other words, you got two conflicting signals there.
it'll take the fire from the ginger and then ignite what's going on in your head, and then you wind up in trouble. So that was, when I discovered, it's undigested anger, I wonder what I'm angry about. I sat in meditation and I started going back. When is there a time in my life when I wanted to die? And that also takes courage.
Yeah, it's a weird thing.
Still, to go into self-inquiry with compassion. This is compassionate.
Curiosity first, right? And compassion.
Yeah. And really, it's a self-confrontation.
Yeah.
My PhD work was all about this. It's called the Hurt Model, Healing Unresolved Trauma. And what I say is, this has to be done with compassion. So I went backwards and I found this 10-year-old version of myself that was being sexually abused by the vice principal of my elementary school. I'd never been angry about this. I'd locked it firmly away because I tried to tell my mom. My dad was out to sea in the Navy. I kind of wound up thinking that this must be something I was doing wrong,
Yep.
right? And the belief system I'd created was, because I'm in a school and I'm sent to the principal's office, was that I have to be perfect or I'm literally not going to survive. So perfectionism has legs under there. It has beliefs, as you're saying. It has a reason for being there. It's not just, I'm a perfectionist. there is a story underneath it that was about survival.
Like the perfectionism is just the strategy.
It's just a strategy. It's a
Yeah.
coping strategy, and it's one that's been outdated now. You don't want to keep the coping strategies of an upset, traumatized child part of you. So then that requires this retraining of your child belief system,
and first meeting that child, right?
meeting them with compassion
Right.
and love,
And
care,
Yeah.
not judgment, like, oh, sweetheart, right? And so all of this is, there are so many different levels of childhood that require that, because we have hurt and betrayal and trauma all the way through.
Mhm.
And that requires you turning toward yourself,
Mhm.
becoming more and more tolerant to all of your life experiences, realizing that, yes, they were painful. No, they probably should not have happened. And no, you did not deserve it. But those two things, should and deserve, if you can take them off the table, say, absolutely, you did not deserve that. This shouldn't have happened. And it did. So now let's work from here, right? This
Yeah.
did happen. Where's the wisdom that I'm going to be able to work with? How do I digest this? And that may be that you need to have, I always call it borrowing a brain, a skilled professional to help with that. Not doing it while you're sitting in meditation on a cushion by yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially if it's a relational wound,
Yes.
right? Because my experience, I don't want to paint in black and white here, but generally speaking, if
Mhm.
there's a relational wound, it's best served by a relational repair.
And also if there was a deep sense of not being safe,
Yeah.
you know,
Because that's the first step.
that's the first
We
step in
have to have
all of
safety.
it.
We have to have safety.
Because if
It's
you
required.
don't feel safe,
Yeah.
then you're a zebra being chased by a lion.
There has to be a strategy to find safety. Like
That's right.
that's the attempt, right? So there's always going to be a strategy.
Always
at
going to
play.
be black and white.
Yeah.
Survival, the horizon. I'm either going to die or I'm going to get to safety. And I'm not going to notice all of the other elements in my life, like the birds that are over here, the grass under my hooves if I'm galloping, the softness of the breeze on my fur. It's just lion.
The
It's
yummy
all
meal.
lion.
Yeah.
Right?
The yummy meal, the sex, all the
That's
things that are
right.
waiting for me.
No, I'm not going to have sex because I can't keep another being alive right now. So all my sexual hormones are going to go straight to the production of cortisol. I'm not going to be able to poop or pee because it's not safe to stop and do that while there's a lion on your tail.
Detoxing is not going to happen.
No. And in Ayurvedic medicine, there's only one reason you don't digest, actually. It's because of toxicity.
What they call ama.
Ama. And so toxin in your mind, right? Toxic thoughts, the belief that there are all these toxic people in your world, all of that
Toxic patterns. It's
going
like
to
again,
create this, right?
and that's the idea again.
Stasis.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. With lack of flow. Like this is death, right? Taking
Yes.
hold. And again, that's why I love Ayurveda, because it speaks globally.
Yeah.
Toxicity globally.
Right.
Mental ama, emotional ama, physical ama, spiritual ama. It's like ama is permeating everywhere, and they all affect one another. So as we get toxic ama built up in the body tissues, mental ama will start to grow, et cetera, et cetera. And we can unwind all of these processes if we work in the body, in the mind, in the emotions, on the spiritual level, and it all kind of works together. So as we digest the mental ama, the physical ama will start to digest also, and we can target, right? So it's like targeting, and globally there's a practice.
But the immune system has already gotten habituated into a different way of being.
And this is important what you said, habituated.
This is really important.
Right?
So the nervous system sets the tone, right? Oh my gosh, there's a lion on my tail. I'm in sympathetic nervous system arousal, whether it's fight, flight, flee, or faint. And the whole thing about childhood is we're not autonomous, powerful beings, so we're not fighting, right?
Yeah.
We're likely freezing.
Right.
And so there's a freeze state inside that will occur, and that's stasis, right? So when the nervous system has set the tone, when there's not safety, back to this principle of if there's no safety, there's no healing, then there's a freeze state. Everything's got, right, on ice. Now the gut is going to be in charge of bringing in information. The gut reads the room, and the immune system takes action. And in Ayurvedic medicine, what they say is Vata is about communication, prana, right? Air, your air channels, your space channels,
So this is
nerves.
quality is kind of like wind in space, right?
Yes,
And that's the qualities.
nerves, what they call shrotas, your channels, all of that stuff is actually communicating information. Well, we have 3 nervous systems in our body. One of them's enteric, which is the gut. And so when that's receiving information of it's not safe, then everything freezes. Cortisol is ramming against the gut wall.
Which thins it, weakens it.
Yep,
right?
starts pulling apart that one cell layer thick lining,
Changes the
integrity.
creates more dysbiosis, right? The
Right.
bacteria respond.
Now this sealed tube that goes through your body that's supposed to contain all of this digestive component,
Which
right?
is still technically the outside world until it actually
Yes,
makes its way into our body,
exactly.
right?
Has made its way, and then what's inside goes outside. Now the immune system, which is not overreacting, it's not misbehaving. It's saying, wait a second, broccoli doesn't belong out here. It's wired to actually protect you. It's trying to protect you. It's supposed to read what's not you and what's you, like this piece of broccoli out here, right?
And if it's not you, then we got to attack
We
because
have
this
to
is
attack.
a foreign invader
Yes.
that's threatening our life.
I know. And I always think about Beauty and the Beast, invade us, Sakura. It's like your immune system's doing what it's supposed to
It's
do.
exactly
right?
what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
Right? And again, going back to your sort of developmental emotional piece, safety first. The
Yeah.
body is going to keep you survive. So if it's not perceiving safety,
Right.
well, step one is do whatever you can to
Yep.
create safety and do it to your full capacity.
Yep.
Burn the house down if we have to, essentially.
Yeah. It's
'Cause it
trying
is
to
number one.
overcome this toxicity, this ama, this stuckness, this stasis, and melt it. But that fire, is not doing you any good.
Yeah.
So autoimmunity often is treated in the Western paradigm from the tissues that are being attacked. Hashimoto's is, it's just Hashimoto's disease.
Right.
RA, MS, Raynaud's disease, diabetes type 1, 2, and 3, Alzheimer's, like all these things. We call it by the disease.
Mhm.
We create protocols. We say, this is what's going on. But in fact, what's going on, because once you have one autoimmune disease from leaky gut, right, as one of the major root causes, well, then you have a 75% chance of getting another one. It's not because you're just that messed up. It's because this habituated immune activation is in place now.
Yeah. And we can explain this mechanistically from the
Yes.
integrative functional medicine models. Dr. Aristotle Vojdani, Dr. Datis Karazian, these are
Yep.
two of my favorite people when
Yep.
it comes to the mechanisms of this stuff. And again, why I love having you here is because you bring in this other element of like what's really driving this stuff. Yes, leaky gut. Yes, poor digestive, low hydrochloric acid, perhaps H. pylori. We got infections.
Yeah.
We got metals and toxins that are playing a role. We got poor lifestyle habits. All that is true.
Every one of those things happen when you're a zebra being chased by a lion. You're not going to detox.
So in other words, we live in a toxic world. We can do some things about that.
We
but
can all agree on it.
We're taking it in.
Yeah, it's all there.
So we got to detox.
Yeah, microplastics.
Yeah.
They're everywhere,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, this isn't funny. This is where we're at.
And the infections are, I don't know how we're going to get away from microbes.
Right.
Good luck on that.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
we can't insulate ourselves from this stuff.
Or viruses.
Right.
Right. There are many of those as there are stars in the sky. So when we think about this, then instead of going to that place, it's like, oh, well, then how do we become more tolerant?
Mhm.
How do we increase tolerance in our system toward ourselves and food? It's not, food sensitivities are not about bad food or a weak body. That is not it. You are not fragile. Right. Even though you might feel very fragile when you have a list of 5 things that you feel like you can eat without pain. That's the reality a lot of people are in.
Well, and again, I want to kind of tie this to what you said about safety in a zebra.
Yeah.
Lifestyle and our habits, right?
Mhm.
Most of our habits are created in order to find safety or get some kind
Yeah.
of need met, right? So,
Yeah.
And this really, I'm kind of feeling the sort of masculine feminine dynamic here
Mhm.
too, because what you're saying about tolerance is, again, kind of more of this femininity. It's just, it's kind of this relaxed acceptance, but there's also boundary to it.
Yeah.
So it's not complete, just tolerate everything.
Right.
Right. But we can't be intolerant, right? This is this kind of like distorted masculine energy of just, what's the mental process of that like for you? Like, in other words,
Yeah.
because there's an ignorance piece to all this health stuff. In other words, I'm learning, but I think a lot of people get stuck in the learning. And if they just learn more, and again, to me, that's more the sort of masculine kind of way, stuck in the mind and the head. And if I just learn more and understanding, but that
if
doesn't
I take this supplement,
exactly. That's exactly it. And so we're hitting on what I was really feeling, which is like, we're just trying to do more and become more.
Right.
And what I'm sort of feeling and hearing from you is like, no, we need to really recognize where we're at and come into acceptance of who we are, of our mistakes, of our gifts, of our challenges, of our past, of all this stuff.
This is why I love plant medicine. We haven't dropped that one in there yet because the mycelial,
if done correctly,
the network, when facilitated properly, right, that networks all of that together, and then it can be seen as a whole. As the mind is slow, the default mode network in the brain is slowed down.
It's kind of the ego mind.
Your habituated patterns. That doesn't, no psychedelic medicine changes anyone. It just doesn't. It can change your state.
It opens us up a little
but
bit.
Not your developmental stage, unless you work with the integration of doing exactly what you're saying. And so that's proper facilitation. That's proper working with your little one, your wise older self, bringing them forward, right? So is the feminine, one of the things that I usually will teach is the child part of you is the parent of your grandmother or father. So in other words, every bit of work you do with your little traumatized child and the one that had these coping strategies, and you teach them a more skillful way of being, you're creating a more badass, older, wiser version of yourself. That one that's in the future becomes more resilient, more tolerant, wiser, stronger, right? More compassionate, and gets ready to leave this body and move on. If you ignore that one, if you abuse them, okay, like everybody else eats Ben and Jerry's, how come I can't? This isn't fair. Yeah. Like all of those sorts of things.
Which, by the way, are valid, right? Like I've had those, they make sense, but that's a younger part that's showing up. And and there's a wiser, older, more integrated aspect that we can bring forward.
Well, because genetically you don't break down milk. That's why, and so no, it's not fair, but that's the way it is, So now I'm going to treat my child and my current self with tender, compassionate care, like I cherish this body. I cherish this life. I look at it as something that's just so amazing, as a miracle. And so therefore, I'm going to not complain at the gas station when my car requires a certain kind of fuel. Why can't I put diesel in my unleaded car, right? That's not fair.
I want to put water.
I want to put water in there, right? And so how come that won't happen and it won't work? Well, that's why you have a programming that's yours. And you can't, it's not, like we said earlier, made with indelible ink. You can build tolerance, you can expand skill, you can create more relaxation inside your immune system, better communication. And you still have a code that is your genetics that your body says, I do better with this, right? Genetically, I'm like a freckle away from celiac. So I'm not expecting to eat gluten.
Right.
No, it's not fair. I do so much better when I don't eat it. And I don't, on my birthday, say, I should be able to have a little bit. I just don't. It's I know what RA feels like. Don't want to go backwards. I'm going forwards. And so there are all these other things that are choices I can eat that I can offer my teenage and toddler selves,
Which are still present.
Yeah.
No matter how much
Exactly.
work you've done, no matter how old you get, like those
They're
pieces
always
are
in there.
still going to be there.
Yeah. So I don't say, no, you can't have that. Right. I say, oh, look at this almond flour cake recipe. This looks really good. You can have that one with chocolate, or you could do a different version like a red velvet. What would you like? Choose. That's what you do with a toddler.
Right. Well, I mean,
You don't say you can't have it. You give them two other choices.
this is what's cool for me about understanding some of these developmental
Yeah.
teachings and working on them within myself, and also having a 6-year-old,
Yes.
is that I actually get to see it mirrored back to me in real time.
Yep.
And how the patterns are still within me, or how much I've developed through them. And, this is one of those things that I've really come to kind of working into this discussion. There's a piece where, my little one will, I mean, my little boy will, he'd be completely unreasonable and freak out about something. And there's still that part that's lingering in the background of like, oh God, like, judging.
Mm-hmm.
But there's more of a developed one online that goes like, oh yeah, I get it. Like, I understand that you want this cookie before dinner. Like, cookies are so good. I understand.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that's been more of my continuous practicing, and it's gotten pretty easy of just like really, not just compassionate, but like really empathizing to really understand where that 6-year-old is coming from and how unreasonable he is as the adult version of me. But like the understanding of like, oh yeah, like I understand that too. I get it. I get where you're coming from. And for me,
even
that's
better, here's how I do that out
Totally.
in the world in more
Exactly.
complex ways.
And that's just it.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's just been a really therapeutic sort of aspect for me to be able to parent that within him and also myself at the same time. And I think this is part of it that pretty much none of us got to our expectations as children. And there's this beautiful saying that we got from sort of, I think, probably the same teacher. I don't want to speak for you, but it's this this idea of as you are, my dear.
Yeah.
And it's this like, it's like the true deepest sense of the concept of mother, which is that there is nothing wrong with you,
right,
as you are, in all of your glory and all of your pain and all of your trauma and all of your chaos and wickedness and all of it, as you are. So for me, I think a lot of us didn't get that template from our mothers, our grandmothers, our fathers, our grandfathers, our siblings. God, like we just didn't get it. We didn't get those templates fully as children. And so finding those in others, whether they're a practitioner, therapist, teacher, finding those in a partner perhaps, or finding that within ourselves, to me has been the developmental process for me, is really sort of, even in my chaos and my self-judgment, there's still, it's like bringing in this aspect of, oh, as you are, you're still in development. There's nothing wrong with you. And to me, this is kind of that tolerance piece, is the self-acceptance. It is the acceptance of the world, of the food, of my issues, of the crap that I'm still sort of dealing with. And then there's a part of it's just like, God, like I'm tired of this crap.
I'd like to speak into something that you asked me earlier that tags this, and that's the process part of this, right? Rather than, I can hear people say, do I have to tolerate my narcissistic, abusive right? Whoever that is, parent, spouse, ex, whatever it is, child, boss, right? I hear this a lot from the highly sensitive people, HSP community, of which I am one.
And when you say highly sensitive, maybe explain that. Is this the foods, chemicals, emotions, energies? What is it?
Yeah, just an empath.
Everything,
right?
Everything.
It's a boundary that doesn't really exist. Very porous, brings whatever is there,
which has gifts and sort of downsides, right?
So many gifts, and very little tolerance, right? So one of the things that I will teach people around this is your inputs as you bring them in. Like you see people walking around with headphones now a lot, right? People are learning about their neurological diversity and places that they diverge from other people and the way that they bring in information and process. And I think this is very important because it speaks to the thing I started with. There are 8.5 billion people, different templates, different. And one of the things that, oh gosh, so long ago, an early Buddhist teacher said was, rather than expecting the whole world to be covered with leather, rather put your own sandals on and go for a walk. And I think that, that struck me really really hard when I read that. I thought, that is so good,
Yeah.
because I could look back at the one that got rheumatoid arthritis, and she expected the world to be covered in leather. She expected her expectations to be met by everyone in the world rather than meeting them for herself.
I'm also thinking about it from the sort of Christian perspective, and it's like,
Yes.
instead of the world being paradise and heaven,
Yes.
put on the armor of God,
Yes.
right? And
Or
it's like,
recognize heaven that's already within, as
That's right.
Jesus said,
Right.
right? The kingdom of heaven is within. It's already there if you can see it.
yeah.
If you can look and say, this is part of heaven, right? And how I am with it, rather than see the beam in the other person's eyes, see the mote in your own, like all of those things. Christ said that so many ways. So I always will say, a lot of times there's a emphasis on having boundaries with the external world, whether it's light or sound or people's energy. And if you develop tolerance by setting the boundaries with your own mind first, then you will become more tolerant. You can take more in and have it not affect you badly. We came in here into this studio talking about Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And I said, oh man, the inputs, all of the light, all the noise, all of the different smells, all of the everything, all the energy. I'm a projector on human design. I take all of it in. Well, the three of us that were here said, oh yeah, it's about 3 days and then we're ready to go home, right? But it's kind of a fun experience when you first start. And that's an important pointing to that. Actually, that is the way the world works. There are all these different experiences, all these different templates of environment too. And if you can build your tolerance to all of it
And understand your limit too, right?
and understand your limit and set a boundary, right? It doesn't mean you need to go sit in the casino if you're in Las
Just
Vegas
endure it all.
24/7 and white knuckle, like
breathe in the smoke.
go to your room, order room service, have a bath, right? And so that's setting a boundary with your mind, with your own self, and making sure that you know your limits, right? But you're not judging anything about what's going on.
It's funny that you bring up Vegas, because I agree. This is like a perfect analogy, because
So
they have
good.
like beautiful, brilliant spas and spa services, right? Like
Yes.
the level of customer service in Vegas and places can be fantastic. They have
Yeah.
some of the best restaurants, right?
Yeah.
They got some of the best sushi and steak and whatever you want to eat, they got it, right?
Yeah.
Jelena, which is this beautiful vegetarian restaurant, like right in the heart of the casino. So there's really good qualities. And so it's like, then it's the discernment, it's figuring out what your limit is, tolerating it, having some acceptance around all the chaos that's there and all the negativity and the crazy energies and all these things.
Bringing joy.
Totally. And just like, and really choosing.
Yeah.
But you mentioned something too, that we were kind of talking about process, and this sparked it for me, where I started not only accepting, so, cause I've seen this so many times in my clients, there's this fighting of the process, like, cause they've been in it for so long, they're just done. They're like ready to be done. And for me, there was like, oh, there's an acceptance of the process itself. And then that even transcended into true recognition of the wisdom and the beauty and the divinity of process itself.
Right.
Again, just look at a child in the womb. We're not speeding that up. No
Mm-hmm.
matter how technologically advanced we get, like, that's how we do it best. That is the only way to do it to perfection. And it's a process.
That's exactly
And as a
right.
mother, that's part of I think the energetic quality that comes through of like, there's nothing to do here to rush this.
That's right.
We go with it. We try to align with it. And there's a being with. And so I think this is the same thing with healing or development or any of these aspects. It's like actually first getting out of fighting the process, accepting of the process, and then you can even enjoy it.
And having patience.
Totally. Yeah.
Right? Being
Not my strength. Not my
patient.
strength.
Well, pitta.
Yeah.
So pitta people tend to not be that patient.
That's us.
That has been the one that I work on the most in my life, is just being patient with the process. And I'm a very, very fast processor. So
Yeah,
being
me
patient
too.
with people that are slower processors around
Yep.
me,
Yep.
that's important.
Yeah,
right?
that used to piss me off.
Yeah.
Right? Like whether it's a checkout at the grocery store, like you name it, like
Yeah.
everything in life, like what's wrong? Why can't people do things fast and efficient?
Undigested anger.
Totally. and it
And it's
showed up.
constant.
That's the thing, and it
Yeah.
showed up even if it didn't express outwardly. It was constantly expressing inwardly, because of this perfection piece, all those P's that you mentioned. Dr. Keisha, we could keep going. I can go
Yeah.
this a million. I do want to wrap up on, is there anything that maybe we didn't touch on that we left out that you feel like you want to throw into this? If not, that's okay. I mean, we covered Ayurveda, we covered some of the emotional aspects, we covered sort of functional and integrative capacity and development. Is there anything with regard to food sensitivities and this sort of autoimmune connection that maybe we
Yes.
didn't hit?
And it will feel like it's not connected when I give this little process,
Okay.
but it's a process because it's not food. Elimination diets can cause orthorexia, right? Fear of
Describe that.
food, where food is bad. I'm bad if I go off the wagon, right?
Collectively, we are orthorexic beyond belief.
Yes,
Every
yes.
food category.
Go on social media, it's just crazy.
Every one of them's evil.
Every food's evil. And so moving out of that paradigm to just the thing I was talking about before, where you become awake and aware to your thoughts. It's really developing awake awareness to your own thoughts, not to everything out here, but to in here. And the way I like to give people a process for that is go out and either buy or collect some light colored pebbles and another set of dark colored pebbles, and start your day out when you wake up first thing, and put a light colored pebble for every life affirming thought you have in a bag or in your pocket. Just pay attention that you're transferring a light colored pebble and you're registering a life affirming thought. You wake up, oh my gosh, I'm so happy that I can see, that my eyes work. I am so grateful that my teeth are here to brush.
And so I want to pause you here real quick, because this doesn't mean like, so we're having sort of unconscious positive thoughts, but you're saying the conscious positive
Awake
thoughts.
to
So
all your thoughts. You're not judging them as negative or positive, but life affirming and life detracting. Okay. So then if there's a life detracting thought, oh man, it's raining again. I'm from the Pacific Northwest. A lot of people have this lamentation about the weather gets you nowhere.
I got rid of thousands of negative thoughts by moving from Seattle to San Diego.
That's not training.
No, but it's efficiency.
It is. So there's a term I've coined called disappointment tolerance and disappointment intolerance. And so what you're doing is, if you have disappointment intolerance, you have food sensitivities. Okay. So start noticing, become awake and aware to all the disappointments. Put a dark colored pebble in your pocket. At the end of the day, take those pebbles and put them on your bed, the table, the floor, and just take a look. And the first day, if you've done this all day and you haven't gone to sleep to yourself, you will probably see a taller dark pebble pile. And then the next day, start again. By the end of the week, as soon as one of those life detracting thoughts comes up, this disappointment intolerance, it'll start coming through your mind, your mental stream, and then you'll go, oh, and they'll have a way of replacing it. Oh, that hummingbird this morning was gorgeous. I loved watching the colors on its throat when it was eating. You replace it, right? Now you have a light colored that you can put there. This is developing, there's science behind this, awe and wonder. It's learning how to lead with gratitude and appreciation, which changes the biochemistry of your body and your gut integrity and your tolerance level to everything in the environment, including your food and yourself.
I think what's important about that is that you said you're learning.
You're learning.
Because again, this is coming from...
It's a process orientation.
That's right. And so much of these things are practices.
Yeah.
It's practicing. And you can view practice as a pain in the ass. If you want to become a good piano player, and the fact that you have to go through this process of practicing, you can view that as a hurdle and something that you have to overcome, or you can view it as something so cool that A, you get to do it, and B, you can do it. Like, what a wild thing that you can learn how to do some of these things, right? So that's part of the appreciation of the process itself. That, again, that's the wonder and the awe for me, that it really hit home during a healing session. I was like, oh my God, process. Like, what a gift process is.
Yeah.
That we can't just flip a switch. Like, that's so boring. That's so lame.
And it's also impossible.
Yeah. but it's also lame, which is probably why it's impossible. Because how lame would it be to be able to just flip switches like that? Like there's so much juice
Rehabilitation.
in process, but the practice is important, which is to say that every time I practice my golf swing, I'm going to get some that aren't very good.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to get some that are unbelievable. And there might even be some expectations that I can do it again, and I may fail. And it's like, and sort of watching some of these things unfold is part of the thing. And so I love this. I think it's important to state that it's a practice. It's a very cool one. So if there's any barriers to collecting pebbles, if you're in the city, I'm sure you can get some stuff online and on Amazon of whatever, just to knock down some of those barriers so you can do this.
Or
this
replace it with something different than pebbles.
Sort of beads. Like there's a million things that you could use, right?
Exactly.
Find something to execute this. The pebbles aren't the important part.
Yeah.
It's the actual process of this.
And the kinesthetic is a reminder. And then just notice if you see a pile and you count them and you're goal oriented, or at the end of it you go, yeah, I crushed that. Just, like, okay, begin again.
Absolutely. And again, there's this kind of flipping over of any part of the process. You can, with losing weight, whatever, you just kind of enjoy the whole thing. Like view it as this journey that you're on. So again, Dr. Keisha, thank you so much for doing this. You flew down here for this interview. I'm so grateful because there's nobody that could have delivered this like you. You're a true synthesizer. I appreciate everything you're doing in this world, and I'm just so grateful to know you.
Thank you. Back at you.
Well, this concludes today's interviews, and I truly hope you enjoyed the fantastic information shared by our speakers. Be sure to tune in tomorrow because we have 3 more brilliant experts sharing scientifically proven strategies to help you accelerate healing, boost your energy, balance your hormones, and improve your gut. If you feel you might miss any of the upcoming interviews, I highly recommend you grab your all-access pass today at the exclusive event-only price of $67, so you can watch and rewatch at your leisure. All you have to do is click the button on this page to secure instant on-demand access to all 15 presentations, plus over $1,200 in bonuses. On behalf of the entire production crew, I want to thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow for the Food Sensitivity Summit.